The twin brothers and Rome's violent start. Have you ever thought about how the very first moments of something, its beginning, might shape everything that comes after? It's a deep idea, isn't it? And for Rome, one of history's greatest empires, its beginning was wild and sad, like a shadow cast across a long road. The story goes that Rome was founded by twin brothers, Romulus and Remus. They were babies, abandoned and left to die. But a she-wolf found them and, incredibly, nursed them. Later, a shepherd raised them. So, right from the start, their lives were tough, full of harsh challenges and amazing survival. As adults, they decided to build a city, a new home. But here's the thing, they couldn't agree on where to put it or who would be in charge. It was a fierce argument, a clash of brothers, each wanting his own way. And this argument, this disagreement about the very foundations of their dream, turned terrible dots. Imagine you and your best friend are planning a huge, exciting project together, something you both really care about. You work hard, you share dreams, but then you fight, a really big fight, about a key part of it. What if that fight gets so heated that someone crosses a line and something breaks, maybe even the friendship itself? And what if, even after that, you still have to finish the project? That's kind of what happened. In a fit of rage, Romulus killed Remus. So Rome, this city that would conquer so much of the world, was born from a brother's blood. Its first stone was laid, not just with hope, but with violence and sorrow. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if that initial painful act, that deep personal betrayal, somehow whispered a promise about Rome's future, a future filled with incredible power, but also endless conflict and a readiness to fight for what it wanted. A reminder that sometimes, even great things begin with a heartbreaking cost. The first kings, Rome's early leaders, good and bad. Have you ever thought about how every big story has its very first chapters? For Rome, before it was a mighty republic or a vast empire, it began with kings. These weren't kings like in fairy tales, always wise or always kind. No, these were real people, and their choices, good and bad, carved out the path for everything that came after. Imagine a city just starting, like a new team forming. The first people in charge set the rules, build the first buildings, and decide what kind of place it will be. Rome's first kings, one by one, took on this enormous task. Some were remembered as great founders. They organized the city, gave people laws, and even built important temples. They worked to make Rome a safer, stronger home for everyone living there. These were the leaders who saw the bigger picture, who truly tried to make things better for their community. But here's the thing, not all leaders are good. As time went on, some kings became selfish. They grew hungry for power, ignored the needs of their people, and sometimes even ruled with cruelty. They forgot that being a leader meant serving, not just being served. It's a bit like when a group project starts. If the first person leading doesn't listen, or only cares about their own ideas, the whole project can fall apart, and people lose trust. It creates a feeling that isn't fair, and that feeling can stick around for a long time. These early years, with both noble builders and power-hungry tyrants, showed Rome something vital. It taught them the incredible power a single leader holds, and how that power can be used to build up or to tear down. The decisions made by these first kings, in moments of great hope and terrible fear, laid down the very first layers of what Rome would become. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how much our own first steps, our very first leaders, shape the world we live in today. Learning from neighbors, how Etruscans shaped Rome. Have you ever stopped to think about how much we learn just by watching someone else? Maybe it's a new dance move, a trick in a video game, or how to solve a tough math problem. Early Rome was a bit like that, learning so much from its older, more developed neighbors, the Etruscans. These people weren't just living nearby. They were building impressive cities, creating beautiful art, and perfecting their crafts. Rome, at its start, was a smaller, simpler place. But the Romans were smart. They watched. They saw how the Etruscans built strong city walls, engineered clever drainage systems, and even designed the arch, a structure that would become famous in Roman architecture. Here's the thing. Etruscan kings even ruled Rome for a time, bringing their advanced knowledge directly into the city. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to build the coolest treehouse ever. You might look at your friend's amazing treehouse next door, seeing how they braced the walls or made a secret entrance. You wouldn't just copy it. You'd take those good ideas, change them a bit, and make them even better for your own treehouse. That's what Rome did with the Etruscans. They learned about everything from how to organize an army to religious rituals, even the symbols of power that Roman leaders would later use. This wasn't just simple borrowing. It was a deep exchange, a powerful lesson in how cultures grow stronger by being open to new ideas. It reminds us that no great civilization, no great person, truly rises alone. Instead, we are all woven into a larger story, constantly learning from those around us, taking their wisdom and shaping it into something uniquely our own. It's a quiet testament to the enduring power of connection and shared knowledge. A terrible act. The event that ended kings. Have you ever wondered what it takes for an entire city to say, enough is enough? What makes people finally decide they can't live under a certain rule anymore? For ancient Rome, a single, deeply terrible act sparked a change that altered their history forever. Rome had been ruled by kings for a long time. The last was Tarquin the Proud, a cruel and unfair leader. His family was no better, but it was a horrifying act by his son Sextus that pushed the Roman people past their breaking point. Sextus committed a grave injustice against a virtuous Roman noblewoman, Lucretia. This wasn't just a personal crime. It was an extreme abuse of power, a profound violation of honor and trust that shocked everyone. Here's the thing. Lucretia's tragic story became a symbol. It showed the Roman people, clearly, how truly corrupt and dangerous their rulers had become. It was a total disregard for human decency and the values Rome held dear. Think about it like this. Imagine a trusted leader, maybe a respected coach, someone meant to uphold fairness. Then, that person does something absolutely terrible, betraying everyone's trust, going against everything they stand for. That single act of betrayal would shake the entire team or school. People would feel deeply angry and might demand that leader be removed. That's a bit like what happened in Rome. And that's why it matters. This one terrible act, full of cruelty and injustice, didn't just end a life. It ended an entire system. It sparked a wave of fury that led the Roman people to rise up, overthrow their kings, and create something new. It reminds us that even when power seems absolute, a deep longing for justice and dignity can change the world, ushering in new ways for people to live. Goodbye. King's Rome becomes a republic. Have you ever felt like someone in charge wasn't really listening, or didn't seem to care about what was fair? Imagine that heavy feeling, but stretched across an entire city, lasting for generations. For a long time, ancient Rome was ruled by kings. These were powerful leaders, and some were wise, but others, well, others were cruel and only thought of themselves. Here's what happened. After a particularly terrible king, named Tarquin the Proud, went too far and mistreated his people, the Romans had finally had enough. Their anger wasn't just a passing storm. It was a deep, burning flame that changed everything about their world. They decided they would never again put all their trust, all their power, into the hands of just one person. They had learned a hard lesson. Absolute power, given without checks, can corrupt deeply, twisting even good intentions into something ugly. So, Rome chose a new path, a brave new way to govern themselves. They created something called a republic. Think of it like this. If you and your friends are planning a big group project for school, you wouldn't want just one person making every single decision without asking anyone else, especially if that person always picked the easiest job for themselves. You'd want everyone to have a say, to share the work, and to pick a leader who truly serves the group, not just their own desires. That's a bit like what Rome did. Instead of a king, they had elected officials. Often, two main leaders called consuls served together, and they only stayed in power for 1 year. This shared power meant no single person could become a tyrant again. It was a risky idea, giving more power to the people, even if it was just some of the people at first. But here's the thing, it built something much stronger, something that lasted for centuries. It built a foundation where many voices could be heard, where laws were debated by different groups, and where the idea of public service became truly important. It was a bold step, a profound moment when a whole city decided its future would be shaped, not by a crown, but by shared responsibility and a deep longing for justice. This choice echoed through history, showing how the basic human desire for fairness can truly change the world. A new republic, power to the people sort of. Have you ever felt like someone else made all the rules, and you had no say? Imagine living under a king, one person born into power, deciding everything. For centuries, Rome was just like that. But then, something shifted. The people, tired of being told what to do, throughout their last king. In that moment, a powerful new idea was born, a concept that would echo through time, a republic. This was a huge promise, a whisper of a different future. It meant power wouldn't belong to just one family anymore. Instead, it would be shared among citizens. They would elect their own leaders, people meant to represent them, to make laws and guide the country. Think of a big school project. Everyone votes for team leaders, and those leaders are supposed to listen to the whole team. But here's the thing about Rome's new system. Not everyone's voice was equally loud. Rome's republic, this shining new way to govern, had a major catch. While it was a huge step away from kings, not all people were truly equal. Only a select few, the wealthy and powerful families, held most influence. They were called patricians. Most ordinary people, the plebeians, had much less say, even as citizens. It was like a new online game promising fair play. But some players started with all the best gear, while others worked hard to catch up. The idea of power to the people was planted, a beautiful seed. But the ground wasn't quite ready for everyone to equally grow. That's why this time in history matters so much. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it showed the world a new way to organize government, a different path forward. It teaches us that even when we aim for something noble, like fairness and shared power, the journey to truly get there is long, complicated, and full of struggles. It's a quiet reminder that real change doesn't happen quickly. Sometimes, the biggest dreams begin with small, uneven steps toward a better tomorrow. Rich versus poor. The big fight in early Rome. Have you ever felt like your voice wasn't heard, even when you knew you were right, or you worked just as hard as everyone else? Imagine that feeling, not just for a moment, but for generations, for entire families and communities. This was the raw, deep struggle that shaped early Rome, a quiet war between those who had everything and those who had almost nothing. On one side were the patricians, the rich, powerful families. They were born into their status, owned vast lands, and held all the important government jobs. They made the laws, led the armies, and basically ran the whole show. And on the other side, the plebeians. These were the common people, farmers, artisans, soldiers. They tilled the fields, built the city, and fought Rome's wars, often risking their lives. But they had almost no say in how Rome was run. They couldn't be elected to high office, and their concerns often fell on deaf ears. If a harvest failed, they might fall into debt, and without fair laws, their land could be taken, or they could even become enslaved. It was a heavy burden, living under rules you had no part in making, constantly feeling the weight of injustice and the sting of being overlooked. Think of it like being on a soccer team, where only the captain's family gets to play in the main games, wear the best uniforms, and make all the decisions. Even though every single player trains just as hard, or even harder, the other players are crucial to the team, but their effort isn't truly valued or recognized. It feels unfair because it is. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. It was about whether every person deserved a voice, a fair chance, and protection under the law. The long, hard fight between Rome's rich and poor taught them a powerful lesson, that a society can only truly thrive when everyone feels they belong. And that true strength comes from lifting each other up, not holding others down. It's a truth that still echoes today, reminding us that fairness isn't just a nice idea, but a building block for any lasting community. Rules written down. The 12 tables of justice. Have you ever felt like the rules weren't fair? Maybe in a game or at school. Imagine playing a sport where only the referee truly knew all the rules. And sometimes, those rules seem to change right in the middle of the game. That feeling of confusion, of not knowing what to expect, can be really unsettling. This is kind of how things felt for many ordinary people in early Rome. For a long time, Rome's laws weren't written down anywhere for everyone to see. Instead, they were mostly known by a small group of powerful families, called These patricians were the judges and leaders, and because the laws were unwritten, they could sometimes interpret them in ways that only benefited themselves. If you were a regular citizen, a plebeian, you had to trust that the patrician judges would be fair, but often they weren't. This lack of clear, public rules left many feeling powerless and unprotected. It was a huge problem, causing deep anger and frustration. So, the plebeians stood up. They demanded that the laws be written down, clear for everyone. And, after much struggle, that's exactly what happened around 450 BC. Rome created what we now call the 12 Tables of Justice. These were a collection of basic, everyday laws, covering things like property rights, debt, and how to deal with crime. They weren't complicated. They were meant to be understood. These laws were carved onto 12 bronze tablets, and then proudly displayed in the Roman Forum, the bustling heart of the city, where everyone could see and read them. This was a monumental change. Suddenly, justice wasn't a secret whisper among the elite. It was loud and clear, etched in stone for all to read. This meant judges now had to follow these public laws, and citizens, no matter their background, could understand their rights and duties. It brought a sense of stability, of knowing what was expected, both from the leaders and from each other. It was a powerful step towards fairness, showing that rules exist to protect everyone. And that's a belief that still echoes today. Wars in Italy. Rome fights to grow strong. Have you ever wondered how something truly massive starts from small beginnings? For ancient Rome, its journey to power wasn't easy. It was a long, hard climb, full of battles fought right in its own backyard. Imagine a tiny sapling pushing its way up through rocky soil, surrounded by bigger trees. That sapling fights for every drop of water, every ray of sunlight, just to survive. That's a lot like early Rome. It wasn't born mighty. It was just one town among many tribes and cities across Italy. Each had its own ways, lands, and ambitions. Here's the thing. If Rome wanted to protect itself, feed its people, or have a voice, it couldn't stand still. It had to fight. These weren't random fights. They were wars for survival, then security, and eventually, growth. The Latins, Samnites, Etruscans, these were their neighbors, often rivals. Think about how you build muscle. You push your body, sometimes to its limits, lifting weights or running. It hurts, you get tired, but your muscles repair and become stronger. That struggle, that effort, creates strength. For Rome, every hard-won battle, every alliance, every difficult peace treaty was like another set of reps. It taught them to organize armies, build roads, and govern new lands. These early conflicts weren't just about winning land. They were about forging the Roman identity. The constant need to defend, adapt, and overcome built deep discipline and resilience. It taught them that unity and determination could conquer challenges. In this fierce struggle, Rome wasn't just growing bigger, it was learning what it truly meant to be Rome. Pyrrhus's costly wins. Winning but losing big. Have you ever won something, but afterward, it just felt heavy, like you got what you wanted, but the price was too high? That strange, sad feeling is what a Pyrrhic victory is all about. Named after King Pyrrhus back in ancient times, before Rome was the giant empire, a brilliant Greek general, King Pyrrhus of Ep, challenged Rome's growing power. He led his armies against the Romans, winning huge battles. Twice. Imagine your team winning the championship. Pyrrhus had those moments, but after each victory, joy was quickly drowned by a terrible truth. His army, full of brave men, was almost completely destroyed. He famously looked at his battlefield, strewn with his own dead soldiers, and said something like, "One more victory like this, and we shall be utterly undone." He saw the future clearly. He might have won the day, but each win meant losing his future, his entire fighting force. It's like getting a perfect test score by staying up all night, getting really sick, and missing your favorite concert. You won the test, but lost something truly important. This is why Pyrrhus's name lives on. It teaches us something deep about sacrifice and what real success looks like. Sometimes, winning a fight isn't worth the damage it does to everything else. It makes us think, what are we truly fighting for? And if the cost of getting what we want leaves us with nothing meaningful. Pyrrhus won the battles but lost the war, leaving his kingdom vulnerable. It's a quiet reminder that not all victories are worth celebrating. Rome versus Carthage. The first big showdown. Have you ever felt that shiver? That deep feeling when two giant forces are about to collide. Not just a small argument, but something huge, where everything is on the line. That's what happened when Rome, still growing strong, met Carthage, a powerful trading empire across the sea. These weren't just two cities. They were like two different ways of life, two massive hearts beating with different dreams, set on the same small world. Here's the thing. Ancient history often feels far away, but these moments of grand conflict, they tell us something about ourselves. Carthage, with its skilled sailors and rich markets, controlled the western Mediterranean. They were like the cool, established older kids who had everything figured out. Rome, on the other hand, was the ambitious newcomer, full of fire, still learning, but with a fierce spirit. Imagine being on a school sports team, and you're new, but you've got this incredible drive. Then, you face the undefeated champions from the rival school. That feeling, that mix of fear and determination, is a bit like what Rome must have felt. They had to decide, stay in their lane, or challenge the champion and risk everything. Their first big fight, what we called the First Punic War, wasn't just about land or money. It was about survival, about who would lead the future. It was a long, brutal struggle, mainly fought on the sea, which was new and terrifying for Rome, a land power. It forced them to adapt, to build a navy almost from scratch, showing how desperate they were. Think about a time you had to learn something totally new, really fast, just to keep up or win. Maybe a new video game, or a complex math concept. The pressure is intense, and the fear of failure is real. But sometimes, that pressure makes you stronger, makes you discover what you're truly capable of. When the dust finally settled, after years of heartbreaking losses and hard-won victories, Rome had won. But it wasn't a simple triumph. It came at an immense cost, etching deep scars onto both sides. It reminds us that even when we achieve something great, the journey often leaves its mark, showing us the true weight of what it means to push beyond our limits. And that's why it matters. These ancient battles echo with the struggles we face, big or small, teaching us about courage, loss, and the quiet strength of the human heart. Hannibal's crazy plan, elephants across the Alps. Have you ever faced a challenge that seemed completely impossible, like trying to finish a massive project when you're just so tired, or climbing a really steep hill when your legs ache? Well, imagine a general named Hannibal. Long ago, looking at the giant, jagged Alps mountains, he wasn't thinking about a hike. He was thinking about war. Hannibal was from Carthage, a powerful city that was Rome's biggest enemy. He had a deep, burning hatred for Rome. Instead of fighting them where they expected, he decided on a plan so wild, people still talk about it. He would march his entire army, tens of thousands of soldiers, horses, and even massive war elephants from Spain, across Gaul, modern-day France, and then over the Alps, right into Rome's backyard. Think about that. Enormous animals, built for warm lands, trying to cross icy, deadly peaks. It was a gamble that defied common sense, a truly desperate, brilliant move. Imagine trying to lead a very difficult group project, but instead of just your classmates, you have hundreds of very grumpy, freezing animals. And you're doing it in a blizzard, uphill, for weeks. The cold winds would bite, rocks would crumble, and soldiers would slip into deep ravines. Many men and most of the elephants didn't make it. Their journey was a slow, painful crawl, filled with frostbite and fear. Each step was a battle against nature itself. But Hannibal kept pushing, his eyes fixed on Rome. This wasn't just about strategy. It was about an unbreakable will, a furious purpose that drove him and his men through unbelievable hardship. It reminds us that sometimes, even when a path seems impossible and costs so much, the sheer force of human determination can achieve the unthinkable. It leaves you wondering, what can you do when your will is truly set? Canny, Rome's worst day on the battlefield. Have you ever had a day so bad you felt like giving up? A day where everything just went wrong, and the future felt completely dark. For ancient Rome, August 2nd, 216 BC, was that day. It happened at Cannae. Here's what happened. Rome faced its greatest enemy, Hannibal, and his Carthaginian army. This wasn't just a battle, it became a nightmare. Imagine 80,000 Roman soldiers marching out. By day's end, almost 70,000 were dead or captured. Think of that number. Most of Rome's army gone in hours. It was total destruction. The feeling across Rome must have been crushing. Every family felt this terrible loss. Rome itself felt stabbed in the heart. You know how in a game, one team completely dominates another. The score is so lopsided, you wonder if the losing team had any chance. This was like that, but with lives. Hannibal, a genius general, tricked the Romans, surrounding them. They were trapped, like fish in a net, with no way out. It's like realizing you're completely stuck on a big test. That helpless panic, but on a massive scale. Cannae could have broken Rome forever. It showed their vulnerability, how easily everything could be lost. But here's the thing, Rome didn't give up. This dark day, instead of ending them, forged something stronger. A terrible wound, yes, but deep wounds can teach resilience. They show us the quiet strength to keep going when hope seems lost. It reminds us that after the worst day, there can still be a tomorrow. Scipio rises. A young general changes everything. Have you ever felt like things were just impossible? Like no matter what you tried, nothing would ever get better? That's how Rome felt during one of its darkest times. Hannibal, a brilliant general, had crushed their armies again and again. Rome was on its knees, her spirit broken, her future uncertain. It seemed like the end, a slow, painful fading of everything they had built. But sometimes, when all hope seems lost, a different kind of strength emerges from the most unexpected places. This is where Scipio comes in. He wasn't an old, experienced general with years of battles behind him. He was young, just 25, when he stepped forward. People probably looked at him and wondered, what can he possibly do? Here's the thing, Scipio looked at the war in a totally different way. Imagine your favorite sports team is losing terribly, game after game. Everyone keeps trying the same old plays, and they keep failing. The fans are sad, the players are defeated. Then, a new, young player suggests a wild, unexpected strategy, something totally different. It feels risky, maybe even a little crazy, but it's new, and suddenly, it starts to work. That shock of hope, that feeling of a new beginning, that's what Scipio brought to Rome. He understood that to win, they couldn't just keep defending the same way, so he did the unthinkable. Instead of fighting Hannibal in Italy, Scipio decided to take the war directly to Carthage, Hannibal's homeland, in North Africa. It was a bold, daring move that flipped the entire conflict on its head. This choice, made by one young man, completely shifted the direction of a war that had been bleeding Rome dry for years. And that's why it matters so deeply. It reminds us that courage isn't just about fighting bravely on a battlefield. It's also about seeing things differently, having the strength to try a new path when everyone else has given up. It's a quiet testament to the power of fresh thinking and the human spirit's ability to find light, even when enveloped in the deepest shadows. Zama, the battle that crushed Carthage. What if a whole world depended on one single moment? Imagine a time when two mighty powers, locked in a brutal fight for over 100 years, finally faced their ultimate showdown. That moment was the Battle of Zama. This wasn't just any battle. It was the end of a very long, painful story for Rome and Carthage. For generations, these two empires had clashed, their rivalry shaping the Mediterranean world. Carthage's brilliant general, Hannibal, had famously marched elephants across the Alps and spent years terrorizing Rome on its own soil. He was a master of war, but Rome, in a surprising move, took the fight directly to Carthage's homeland in Africa. This forced Hannibal to return home, to defend his city, his people, his way of life. It was like the championship game after a super long, exhausting season. All the training, the tough losses, the hard-won victories, it all builds up to that one final match. For the ancient world, Zama was that epic championship, with everything on the line. The fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. Rome's general Scipio was smart. He had studied Hannibal, learned from his strategies. Near Zama, Scipio faced Hannibal's terrifying war elephants. But instead of letting them crush his lines, Scipio's clever army made lanes, like open hallways. The elephants charged, but mostly ran harmlessly through these empty paths, scattering. Then, Roman soldiers, fueled by years of fear and a burning desire to finally end this devastating conflict, pushed forward with fierce determination. Carthage was crushed that day, not just defeated, but truly broken. Imagine the quiet despair that fell over the city, the deep, heavy sadness of knowing everything your ancestors built, everything you fought for, was now gone. For Rome, it was a victory, yes, but it left a profound silence. It teaches us how even the greatest powers can be fragile, and how sometimes, after a victory, history carries a deep, reflective weight, reminding us that all things, eventually, fade. Carthage's last stand. A city falls forever. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to see your home, your entire world, just vanish, erased from the map? That's what happened to Carthage. For a long time, Carthage was Rome's biggest rival. They fought 3 huge wars, called the Punic Wars. Imagine 2 rival schools, always competing to be better. But instead of just winning a game, Rome wanted to end Carthage completely. By the Third Punic War, Carthage was already weak, but Rome still saw it as a threat, a wound that needed closing. The Roman general Scipio Aemilianus led the final attack. It wasn't just a battle, it was a siege that lasted years. People inside starved. When the Romans finally broke through, it was horrific. For days, the city burned. Soldiers went house to house, destroying everything. People were killed or enslaved. It was a terrible, brutal end. Here's the thing. Rome didn't just conquer Carthage. They completely destroyed it. They flattened buildings, scattered the rubble, and, according to legend, even salted the earth so nothing could grow there again. Imagine if your school, your town, your entire history was not just defeated, but wiped out so no one could ever rebuild it. That's a level of anger and victory almost impossible to imagine. It wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring Carthage could never, ever rise again. The fall of Carthage in 146 BC marked Rome's absolute dominance. It showed how far they would go to secure their power, a chilling message to anyone who dared oppose them. But even in such a complete victory, there's a quiet sadness. A whole civilization, with its own stories, people, and way of life, was simply gone. It makes you wonder, at what cost does total victory come? And does the memory of such destruction ever truly fade, even centuries later? The Gracchus brothers, fighting for the poor, dying for it. Have you ever felt like things just weren't fair? Like some people had so much, and others had so little, with no way to catch up? In ancient Rome, this feeling was very real for many, and two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, saw it. They saw the heart of Rome struggling. Rome was growing rich, but not everyone shared in that wealth. The powerful few owned huge amounts of land. Meanwhile, thousands of Roman citizens, who once farmed their own small plots, had lost everything. They became homeless, unable to find work, even unable to serve in the Roman army, because to be a soldier, you had to own land. Tiberius and Gaius had a bold plan. They wanted to take public land that Rome had won in wars, and divide it among the poor. They believed this would make Rome stronger, fairer. It wasn't about stealing. It was about giving back a chance. Think of it like this. Imagine a classroom where a few students have all the new shiny art supplies, and others have broken crayons, or no paper at all. The Gracchus brothers wanted to give everyone some basic supplies, so everyone could create and contribute. But the rich and powerful senators saw this differently. They saw their own wealth and power being threatened. They fought back, hard. First Tiberius, then, years later, Gaius, both faced violent ends. They were killed by their enemies, simply for trying to help the poorest people in Rome. Their story is sad, yes, but it also shows us something important. Sometimes, fighting for what's right, for a fairer world, can be incredibly dangerous. It tells us that power doesn't give up easily. Yet, even in death, their actions sparked a fire. They made people think about justice, about what Rome truly stood for, and that's why their names echo through history. A quiet reminder of the price of progress and the fight for human dignity. Marius changes the army, soldiers for hire, not just farmers. Have you ever wondered what makes someone fight? Is it for their country, their family, or something else entirely? For a long time in Rome, being a soldier was something you did because you were a Roman citizen. Most soldiers were farmers. They'd leave their fields, fight for Rome, and then go back home to their farms. It was a duty, a part of being Roman, not a job you got paid much for. But then came a general named Gaius Marius. He saw a problem. Rome was growing, fighting more wars, and it needed more soldiers. Farmers couldn't just drop everything and fight all the time. Their farms would suffer. So, Marius had a bold idea. He started letting anyone join the army, even if they didn't own land. And here's the thing, he paid them. He made being a soldier a full-time career. This was a huge shift. Imagine being on a sports team. At first, everyone plays because they love the game and want to represent their school. Their loyalty is to the school and their teammates. But what if a professional team came along and offered you a salary? Suddenly, your loyalty might shift. You're playing for the coach who hired you, for your pay, and for your own future in the sport. That's a bit like what happened in Rome. Soldiers became loyal to their generals, who paid them and promised them land, more than to the Roman Senate or Rome itself. This made the army powerful and professional, highly trained and ready. But it also meant, if a general was popular, and his soldiers were loyal to him, he could use them to gain political power, even against Rome's own government. It was a trade-off, a stronger army, but a weaker republic. This shift, while it brought strength, planted seeds of future trouble, slowly twisting Rome's path towards a different kind of rule. Sulla's reign of terror. A general takes all power. Have you ever wondered what happens when one person gets so much power they can do anything? It's a scary thought, right? In ancient Rome, there was a general named Sulla. He did something unthinkable. He marched his own army into the city of Rome. Imagine that. soldiers in the streets, not to protect, but to take control. It was a general basically saying, "I'm in charge now." Sulla declared himself dictator, not for a short time like Rome usually did, but for as long as he wanted. This attacked everything Rome stood for: the Senate, the people, all the traditions for shared power, swept away by one man. Sulla then did something chilling. He created prescriptions. These were public lists of his enemies. If your name was on that list, you could be killed by anyone, and your property taken. No trial, no questions, just death. Think how terrifying that would be. Imagine you're at school, and a powerful student, with their own group, decides who's in and who's out. If you're out, your stuff is taken, and no one helps you. That's a tiny echo of what Sulla did. People lived in constant fear, never knowing if a friend might disappear. Justice and fairness seemed to vanish. Sulla's time showed Rome how quickly a system built on shared power can crumble. It reminds us that when rules are broken, and one person takes absolute control, freedom can disappear. It's a sad lesson, teaching us that the safety we feel depends on everyone, even the strongest. Respecting boundaries. Unchecked power can be terrible. Spartacus's rebellion, slaves who dared to fight back. Have you ever felt truly trapped, like someone else was completely in charge of your life, every single day? In ancient Rome, this was the harsh reality for millions. They were slaves. They had no rights, no freedom, no say. Their lives were not their own. Imagine waking up each morning, knowing your entire existence belonged to someone else. They could buy you, sell you, even harm you. You had no power. This was a deep, constant injustice. But sometimes, even the darkest times can't stop the human spirit from yearning for light. This is where the incredible story of Spartacus begins. He was a gladiator, trained to fight to the death for entertainment. Think about it. People considered property, who had lost everything, decided they would rather die fighting than live without freedom. It was a terrifying idea for Rome. It showed even the powerless could rise up. It's a bit like when a rule feels truly unfair, and you just have to speak up. But imagine if speaking up meant risking your very life. That's the bravery these slaves showed. Their rebellion wasn't just about winning battles. It was about reclaiming their humanity. It was about shouting, "We are people. We deserve to be free." Each step they took, each fight they won, chipped away at the idea that they were just tools. They fought with whatever they could find, fueled by a burning desire for a life they had only dreamed of. Many died, but their fight left a deep scar on Rome's proud face. So, what does this story tell us? It reminds us that even against overwhelming odds, the search for freedom and dignity is a powerful force. It shows that the human heart, no matter how crushed, can still beat with hope. And it asks us to remember that true courage isn't just about strength, but about standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible. Three powerful men, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, team up. Have you ever thought about what happens when the most powerful people, who are usually rivals, decide to work together instead? In ancient Rome, at a time when the Republic was wobbling, three incredibly strong men made just such a deal. These weren't friends. They were Julius Caesar, a brilliant military leader on the rise; Pompey the Great, Rome's most famous general; and Marcus Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Each one had immense power and ambition. They could have spent all their energy fighting each other, draining Rome's strength, but they saw a different path. Instead of battling, they formed a secret alliance. It was like an unspoken agreement, a quiet handshake behind closed doors. "You help me get what I want, and I'll help you get what you want," was the silent message. Caesar needed political support and money. Pompey needed land for his soldiers and more influence. Crassus wanted laws passed that helped his businesses and wealth. Together, they formed a kind of supergroup, so powerful that no one in Rome could really stand against them. Think of it like three magnets. Each magnet is strong on its own, but they might repel each other if you push them the wrong way. However, if they find a way to align, they can pull something much bigger and heavier than any single magnet could. That's what these three men did. They knew if they joined their forces, their armies, their money, their political connections, they could bend the Roman Senate, the laws, and even public opinion to their will. It wasn't about what was best for Rome, it was about what was best for them. This alliance was clever, for a while. It allowed them to achieve their personal goals and reshape Rome in ways no one had imagined. But an alliance built not on loyalty or shared vision, but purely on personal gain and hunger for power, is a fragile thing. like a beautiful, complex sandcastle. It looks grand, but the slightest shift, the smallest wave, can make it crumble. It makes you wonder if true power comes from working with people, or from working over them, and how long such a bargain can truly last before ambition turns friends into enemies once more. Caesar crosses the Rubicon, the point of no return. Have you ever made a choice so big, so important, that you knew, deep down, there was no turning back? A moment where everything changes, and you step onto a path that will reshape your future, no matter how scary. That feeling of ultimate commitment, of burning your bridges behind you, is what we call crossing the Rubicon. It's a powerful idea, born from one of history's most dramatic moments. Imagine Julius Caesar, a brilliant Roman general. He was leading his armies far from Rome, gaining victories and loyalty. But back home, things were getting tense. The Roman Senate, which was like the government, was worried about how powerful Caesar was becoming. There was a law: no general could bring his army into Italy itself without permission. Doing so meant you were declaring war on your own country. The Rubicon was just a small, shallow river. It marked the boundary between Caesar's command territory and the official Roman homeland. On January 10th, 49 BC, Caesar stood on its banks. He knew what he had to do. If he stayed put, he'd lose everything he'd worked for. If he crossed, he would start a bloody civil war, challenging the very heart of Rome. It was a choice between his own power and the peace of the Republic. With a deep breath, he led his legions across the water, reportedly saying, "Alia iacta est," meaning the die is cast. He had made his move. There was no going back. Think of it like this. You've been working on a big school project for weeks. You've poured your heart into it, but it's due tomorrow, and you know it's not perfect. You could keep fiddling, but eventually, you have to hit submit. Once you click that button, it's done. You can't unsubmit it. That's your project crossing the Rubicon. Caesar's decision wasn't just about a river. It was about committing to an irreversible action. It teaches us about the weight of choices, especially those that define who we are and what we stand for. Sometimes, to move forward, we must make a decision that locks us into a path, knowing that the journey ahead is the only one we have. Pharsalus, Caesar's big win and Pompey's downfall. Have you ever felt the incredible weight of a single moment? A turning point where everything changes forever. For ancient Rome, such a moment arrived on a hot, dusty plain in Greece, at a place forever known as Phars. Here, two of Rome's most powerful figures, Julius Caesar and Gnaeus Pompey, stood on opposite sides, their armies ready to clash. This wasn't just any battle. It was a fight between former friends, once brothers in arms, now bitter rivals. Imagine two people you care about, both good in their own way, forced into a conflict where only one can win, and the stakes are the future of everything they hold dear. The sadness of that choice, the deep ache of division, hung heavy in the air. Pompey commanded a much larger army, but Caesar, with his daring plans and deeply loyal soldiers, found a way. On that fateful day, his troops fought with a fierce determination that surprised everyone. It was a complete, undeniable victory for Caesar. For Pompey, it was the end of his power, the shattering of his dreams. He was forced to flee, leaving behind not just his army, but his entire standing in the world. It's like when you're building something important with friends, and then one crucial part breaks, and suddenly, the whole project comes crashing down. That feeling of loss and finality, even for someone as powerful as Pompey, must have been overwhelming. This battle wasn't just about who won or lost on a field. It was about one man's relentless ambition changing the course of history, reshaping Rome from a republic to something entirely new. Pharsalus closed a chapter and opened another, echoing with the sound of a falling empire and the rise of a single, all-powerful leader. It reminds us that even grand victories often carry a quiet, heavy cost, a profound loss for what might have been, and it shows us how fragile power can be, how quickly it can disappear, leaving behind only the stories of what once was. Caesar and Cleopatra, a Roman in Egypt's royal court. Have you ever thought about how some meetings, just two powerful people talking, can change the whole direction of history? That's what happened when Julius Caesar, Rome's rising star, found himself in Egypt, a land of ancient secrets and royal drama. He was chasing an enemy, but what he found was Cleopatra, the last queen of a mighty, but fading, empire. Imagine the scene. Rome was a new, surging power, hungry for more. Egypt, meanwhile, was ancient, rich, and full of gold, but also vulnerable, with its royal family fighting amongst themselves. Caesar wasn't there for a vacation. He was there because Rome's interests, and his own, were deeply tied to Egypt's wealth and stability. Cleopatra, a brilliant and determined young queen, saw Caesar not just as a Roman, but as her best chance to keep her throne and protect her country from her own siblings. Can you feel the weight of those moments? The future of two vast worlds, one rising, one struggling to survive, hanging on the careful words and choices of two people. It wasn't just a story about romance, though it became legendary for that. It was about raw power, political survival, and the fierce ambition of two individuals who understood how to play the biggest games. They needed each other. Caesar needed Egypt's resources and loyalty to strengthen his position back in Rome. Cleopatra needed Rome's military might to secure her rule. It's a bit like when you're working on a huge important group project for school. You might have to team up with someone you don't usually hang out with. Someone who has a skill you desperately need to make your project successful. You set aside personal preferences because the larger goal, getting that amazing grade, is so much more important. Caesar and Cleopatra were doing something similar, but the grade was control over empires. Their bond, born out of necessity and ambition, became one of history's most talked about stories. It reminds us that even at the highest levels of power, human connections, with all their hopes and desperate needs, can steer the course of civilizations. It shows how personal decisions, made behind palace doors, can echo through centuries, shaping not just lives, but the very maps of our world. The Ides of March, Caesar's shocking end. What happens when the people you trust the most decide you're a danger? For Julius Caesar, one of Rome's most powerful leaders, that nightmare became real on a day called the Ides of March. This wasn't just any day. It was March 15th, 44 BC. It marks a moment when the future of Rome, and one man's life, changed forever. Caesar had grown incredibly strong. He'd won wars, built cities, and many Romans loved him. But here's the thing. Some powerful senators feared him. They worried he wanted to be king, to end the Roman Republic, where citizens had a say. They believed Rome was better without one ruler, and that Caesar was slowly taking away their freedom. So, they decided to act. Imagine a close-knit group, like a sports team, where one person starts making all the plays, ignoring everyone else's ideas. They might be good, and the team might win, but the others start to feel pushed aside, even angry. They might believe that person is hurting the team spirit. That's a bit like how some senators saw Caesar. They felt he was grabbing too much power, even if he was leading Rome to great things. On that fateful day, Caesar walked into the Senate. His supposed friends and allies surrounded him. What happened next was a blur of daggers. When he saw Brutus, a man he trusted like a son, among the attackers, his last words, some say, were "Even you, Brutus." It wasn't just the pain of the wounds. It was the sting of betrayal from someone so close. It's like realizing your closest friend has been planning against you. Caesar's death was meant to save the Republic, to bring back freedom. But the truth is, it plunged Rome into more chaos and war. It shows us how even with good intentions, violence rarely solves things. Instead, it often creates deeper wounds and unforeseen consequences, leaving sorrow and questions that echo through history. Caesar's avengers, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus, someone you deeply respected, a true leader, was suddenly taken from you, not by illness, but by betrayal, by violence. How would you feel? What would you do? This is exactly what happened when Julius Caesar was murdered. His death left a giant hole, not just in Rome's power, but in the hearts of those who loved him. And three men stepped forward, bound by a complex mix of loyalty, ambition, and a burning desire for revenge. They were like Caesar's avengers, in a way, but with far darker intentions than any superhero story. These were Octavian, Caesar's young adopted son, Mark Antony, his loyal general, and Lepidus, a powerful politician. Their first goal was clear: find and punish Caesar's killers, the men who stabbed him. But underneath that shared purpose, each of them also wanted power for themselves. It's a bit like when a group of friends, maybe after a big argument in school, decide to stand together against a common bully. They all want to win, but each person might have their own reasons. One wants justice, another wants to prove they're tough, and another just wants the fight to be over so things can go back to normal. Their unity is strong, but also fragile, because their personal goals aren't perfectly aligned. This alliance, known as the Second Triumvirate, wasn't about rebuilding Rome peacefully. It was about raw power, about settling scores with brutal force. And the settling scores part led to widespread suffering. The idea that unity could emerge from such a violent act, and yet also lead to more violence, is a profound and sad lesson. It shows us that even when people come together with a seemingly noble goal like revenge, the path they choose can often lead to further darkness. The echoes of Caesar's death would shape Rome for decades, proving that some wounds run so deep, they change everything forever. Philippi, the end. For Caesar's killers, have you ever wondered if some choices, once made, can never truly be undone? Like a ripple in a pond that spreads wider and wider, affecting everything it touches. For Brutus and Cassius, the men who killed Julius Caesar, that moment of choice led them down a path they couldn't escape. They believed they were heroes, saving Rome from a king. But the world saw it differently. After Caesar fell, the Roman world was thrown into chaos, but also into a search for answers. Two powerful figures stepped forward: Octavian, Caesar's young adopted son, and Mark Antony, his loyal general. They didn't see heroes in Brutus and Cassius. They saw murderers, and they vowed to get justice, or perhaps revenge. So, here's what happened. The two sides met in a place far from Rome, in northern Greece, at a town called Philippi. It wasn't just a battle, it was a clash of ideals, a reckoning for the past. Imagine a situation where you've made a really big mistake. Maybe you broke something important, and for a while, you think you've gotten away with it. But then, slowly, the truth comes out, and the consequences arrive, heavy and unavoidable. That's a bit like what happened at Philippi. The forces of Octavian and Antony were strong. On the other side, Brutus and Cassius fought hard, but their cause was fading. One by one, their hopes crumbled. Cassius, seeing his side lose, took his own life. Later, Brutus too faced defeat and chose the same tragic path. It wasn't just a loss on the battlefield. It was the end of a dream, the crushing weight of their actions finally catching up. Philippi showed everyone that even the most powerful acts have consequences. It wasn't about right or wrong in a simple way, but about the profound weight of human decisions. It reminds us how deeply our choices echo through time, shaping not just our own lives, but the world around us, sometimes in ways we can never fully predict or control. Antony and Cleopatra, a love story that shook Rome. Have you ever thought about how a powerful love, a real deep connection between two people, could actually change the world? Not just their world, but the history of an entire empire. That's what happened with Mark Antony, a mighty Roman general, and Cleopatra, the brilliant, captivating Queen of Egypt. Their story isn't just a romantic legend, it was a force that shook Rome to its core. Here's the thing. Antony was one of the most powerful men in Rome after Julius Caesar died. He was supposed to share power and help lead the Roman Republic. But then he met Cleopatra, and everything changed. This wasn't just a fleeting crush. This was a profound connection, a love that made Antony feel more himself, more alive than he had ever been. He spent more and more time in Egypt, drawn to Cleopatra's intelligence and charm, and their shared vision for the future. But for Rome, this was a huge problem. Romans saw Cleopatra as a foreign queen, an outsider, drawing their respected leader away from his duties. Imagine if a close friend suddenly started spending all their time with someone new, someone your family didn't trust, and that friend began making choices that directly went against what everyone expected of them. That's kind of what happened, but on a grand scale. With the fate of an empire hanging in the balance, Antony's rival, Octavian, used this against him, painting Antony as someone who had abandoned Roman values for an Egyptian queen. So this powerful love story became a political weapon. It led to a massive war, not just for power, but for the very soul of Rome. In the end, this intense, passionate love turned into a tragedy, showing us how deeply personal feelings can get tangled up with loyalty, duty, and the future of nations. It reminds us that even in the biggest historical events, human hearts and their choices play an enormous, sometimes heartbreaking, part. Actium, the battle that made Octavian supreme. Have you ever wondered about those moments in history where everything changes, where one single event shifts the entire world? Actium was one of those times. It wasn't just a battle, it was the ultimate showdown for Rome's future, a clash that decided who would hold all the power. Imagine two giants, Octavian and Mark Antony, both incredibly strong, both wanting to lead. Octavian was Julius Caesar's adopted son, young but sharp. Antony was a legendary general, allied with the dazzling Egyptian queen, Cleopatra. They stood on opposite sides, not just of a sea, but of a dream for what Rome should become. This wasn't about land or money, not really. It was about who would take the wheel of an empire after years of fighting. After Caesar's death left a massive power vacuum. So, in 31 BC, their fleets met near a quiet bay off the coast of Greece. Think of it like a championship game where the entire season, maybe even the next decade, depends on this one final play. The tension would have been suffocating. On one side, ships filled with Octavian's soldiers, hoping for a stable Rome. On the other, Antony's forces, with Cleopatra's grand ships, dreaming of a different kind of empire, perhaps one more connected to the east. The battle itself was chaotic and brutal, a swirl of burning ships and desperate cries. But in the end, Octavian's forces were victorious. Antony and Cleopatra fled, and eventually, their story ended tragically. Here's the thing. With Antony gone, there was no one left to challenge Octavian. He stood alone, the undisputed ruler of Rome. This victory at Actium didn't just win a battle. It closed the chapter on the old Roman Republic. With all its struggles and civil wars, it ushered in an entirely new era, one ruled by emperors, with Octavian becoming the first, known as Augustus. It shows us how one single day, one terrible conflict, can hold the fate of millions, shaping not just a nation, but the very path of history, forever changing how we think about power and peace. Octavian becomes Augustus, Rome's first emperor. A new era. Have you ever thought about what it truly means when everything changes, not with a bang, but with a quiet shift in power? For Rome, this happened when a young man named Octavian stepped into a world still reeling from the chaos after Julius Caesar's death. This wasn't just a simple change of leadership. It was the end of something ancient, the Roman Republic, and the start of something entirely new, the Roman Empire. With its very first emperor, Octavian was Caesar's adopted son, and he fought hard for control. After years of civil wars, where Rome was torn apart by its own leaders, people were tired. They longed for peace, even if it meant giving up some of their freedom. So, Octavian, smart and patient, slowly gathered all the power. He didn't just declare himself king. He was given the title Augustus, which means revered one, and it showed he was special, almost sacred. He became the undisputed leader, not just a consul or a senator, but Rome's emperor. Think of it like this. Imagine your school usually makes decisions by voting, everyone getting a say on school rules or the next big event. But then, after a really messy year where nobody could agree, one strong leader steps up and starts making all the decisions themselves. Things might become more organized, and there might be less fighting, but that feeling of we all decide would be gone. And that's what happened in Rome. One person, Augustus, was now at the top, directing everything. This moment felt like a deep breath after a long storm. It brought a time of peace, known as the Pax Romana, which would last for centuries. But here's the thing. It also meant the end of the Republic, where citizens had more of a voice. It was a trade-off, really. Peace for power. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound changes in history happen quietly, shaping the world in ways that can be both calming and, in their own way, a little sad. The Pax Romana, a long time of peace and power. Can you imagine a world where you felt truly safe, where the biggest worry wasn't war, but maybe what you'd have for dinner? For nearly 200 years, something like that happened in the Roman Empire. It's called the Pax Romana, which simply means Roman peace. It wasn't perfect, no time ever is. But it was a huge, long stretch where peace was more common than chaos. Think about it. No big civil wars tearing the empire apart from the inside. Roads were safe for travelers and traders. Laws were mostly fair, applying to everyone, keeping things steady. The powerful Roman army, instead of fighting within the empire, mostly guarded its borders. This meant people could build, they could farm, they could study, they could trade across vast lands without the constant fear of sudden attack or government collapse. It was a time when cities grew, art flourished, and ideas traveled more freely. It's a bit like how your body works. When everything is healthy and running smoothly, no big illnesses, no broken bones, you don't even think about it. You just live, you learn, you play, you grow. But if there's constant pain or sickness, all your energy goes into just trying to feel okay. The Pax Romana was Rome's healthy body. It allowed everyone to focus on growth, on creating, instead of just surviving. This peace wasn't just about stopping wars. It was about creating a sense of calm, a foundation where people felt secure enough to dream, to plan for the future, knowing that things wouldn't suddenly fall apart. It was a golden age, built on the idea that stability could lead to greatness. But here's the thing, even the longest peace can't last forever. It reminds us how precious and how fragile true stability is. It shows us what's possible when societies aren't constantly fighting, but also how much effort it takes to keep that peace alive every single day. The Pax Romana was a powerful dream, and for a long time, it was Rome's reality. Augustus builds Rome, shaping the empire's future. Have you ever seen something really important fall apart? Maybe a friendship, or a team project that just turned into a big mess. It feels chaotic, right? Well, imagine an entire empire feeling that way. Rome had been through years of fighting, a civil war that tore people and families apart. It was broken. Then came Augustus. He stepped into that chaos, not just as a conqueror, but as someone who wanted to heal. He knew Rome needed more than just a new leader. It needed a whole new foundation. He famously said he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. But this wasn't just about fancy buildings, though he built plenty of those temples, public baths, grand forums. It was about rebuilding trust, about creating a sense of order. Think about it like this. If your backpack is totally disorganized, with papers everywhere and pens at the bottom, it's hard to find anything. It feels stressful. But if you take the time to put everything in its place, suddenly, it's easy. You know where things are, and you feel ready for the day. Augustus did that for Rome on a massive scale. He organized the government, fixed the roads, made sure the army was strong but controlled. He brought peace, a long period known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. This time of rebuilding and peace changed everything. It wasn't just about how Rome looked, it was about how Rome felt. It was about giving people hope again, a sense that things would be okay, that their children would grow up in a stable world. His actions shaped not just his time, but the next 200 years. It shows us how one person, with a clear vision and a steady hand, can truly shape the future, leaving behind a legacy that touches countless lives long after they are gone. Teutoburg Forest, a shocking defeat in Germany. Have you ever felt totally safe, like nothing could possibly go wrong, and then suddenly, everything changes? That's a bit like what happened to Rome in a dark, wet forest called Teutoburg. For years, Rome felt unbeatable. Its armies were strong, its soldiers brave, its empire always growing. But sometimes, even the strongest nations face a moment that shakes them to their core. In the year 09 AD, 3 Roman legions, about 15,000 soldiers, marched deep into what is now Germany. General Verus led them. He thought he understood these lands and trusted a local leader, Arminius, who had served in the Roman army. But Arminius had a secret plan. He was a German tribal chief, and he wanted to push Rome out. So, here's what happened. He set a trap. The Roman soldiers marched through a thick, unfamiliar forest. It was rainy and muddy. They were spread out, not in their usual battle formations. Suddenly, German warriors, hidden among the trees, attacked. This was no open battle. It was a desperate ambush. Arrows flew, spears struck, and the dense woods became a terrifying maze. The Romans, used to open fields, were lost, confused, and trapped. Imagine trying to find your way blindfolded in a tangled forest. That's how disoriented they felt. Almost every Roman soldier died, and General Verus took his own life. When news reached Rome, the shock was immense. Emperor Augustus cried out, "Quintilius Verus, give me back my legions." This wasn't just a loss of soldiers. It was a loss of pride, a brutal reminder that even Rome had limits. This event marked a turning point. Rome mostly stopped trying to conquer Germany beyond the Rhine. It showed that even the greatest power can be vulnerable. Sometimes, a deep understanding of your own land and a clever mind can defeat what seems unbeatable. It taught Rome a painful lesson about overconfidence, a lesson that would echo for centuries. Tiberius takes over, living in Caesar's shadow. Have you ever felt like you had to live up to someone else's amazing achievements? Someone everyone admired, who seemed perfect? That heavy feeling, that huge expectation, is what Tiberius faced when he became Rome's new leader. He took over after Augustus, a man many called Rome's greatest leader. Here's the thing, Augustus wasn't just a good leader, he was like a rock star, a hero who had changed everything. He brought peace after years of civil war, built grand new buildings, and made Rome feel powerful and safe. His name was everywhere, a constant reminder of his incredible success. Think of it like a beloved movie series. Augustus was the perfect first film everyone still talks about. Tiberius was a skilled general, and he knew how to manage things, but he wasn't Augustus. He didn't have that easy charm, that natural way of connecting with people. When people looked at Tiberius, they often saw Augustus's ghost, wishing the old leader was still there. They wondered if Tiberius could ever be as good, or if he would always just be second best. It's kind of like being the new captain of a sports team after a legendary player just graduated. That old captain won every game, everyone loved them, and their jersey still hangs in the gym. Now it's your turn. No matter how hard you play or try, people compare you to the one who came before. Every game is under a microscope, judged not just by your effort, but by the shadow of the past. The pressure on Tiberius must have been immense, a lonely weight on his shoulders. Every choice he made, every public speech, was under this huge spotlight, not just for what it was, but for how it measured up to Augustus. It's tough enough to lead, but to do it knowing everyone measures you against a legend, that feels like a heavy, sad burden. Tiberius ruled, carrying that enormous legacy. It makes you think how even powerful people can feel trapped by expectations, struggling to be themselves when the world wants them to be someone else. Caligula's wild reign, a crazy emperor's story. Have you ever wondered what happens when one person holds all the power, with no one to tell them no? In ancient Rome, this question played out in the most terrifying way with Emperor Caligula. He was a young man, adored by the people at first, a ray of hope after a difficult leader, but something changed inside him, slowly, deeply. Imagine a powerful computer. When it starts, it runs perfectly, doing amazing things. But then, maybe a strange virus gets in, or too many programs run at once. It starts glitching, behaving in ways that make no sense, even harming itself and the systems around it. That's a bit like what happened to Caligula's mind. The immense power, the constant flattery, the absolute freedom to do anything he wished. It seemed to overwhelm his understanding of reality. He began to act in ways that shocked everyone, from making his horse a consul to demanding people worship him as a living god. It was a time of fear and confusion. People couldn't understand how someone could change so drastically, from a beloved figure to a brutal, unpredictable tyrant. His reign was short, but it left a lasting scar on Rome, reminding everyone how fragile leadership can be, and how easily great power can break a human spirit. It makes you think about the heavy weight of a crown, and how some burdens are simply too much for anyone to bear, no matter how strong they seem. Claudius invades Britain, expanding the empire's reach. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to reach for something new, something just beyond your grasp, even when you already have so much? That's a bit like what happened with Rome and Britain. The Roman Empire was already vast, a giant network of roads, cities, and people stretching across continents. But there was this misty island to the north, full of mystery and stories, and Rome just couldn't resist. Here's what happened. Emperor Claudius, a man who desperately needed to prove himself, decided to take on this challenge. He saw Britain not just as new land, but as a chance for glory, for resources, and to show everyone he was a powerful leader. It was like he was trying to solve a really big, complicated puzzle. Conquering Britain would be the ultimate victory that secured his place in history. And so, in 43 AD, a huge Roman army landed on the shores of Britain. Think about when you've just finished a really tough project at school, maybe a big essay or a science fair experiment. You feel accomplished, right? But then, you might start looking for the next thing, another challenge to push yourself further. That feeling, that drive to achieve more, to expand your knowledge or your skills, is a lot like what drove Rome. They had conquered so much, but the unknown always held a special pull. They weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting for the idea of an even grander Rome, a Rome that knew no limits. This move changed everything for Britain, bringing Roman roads, laws, and culture, but also years of struggle and resistance. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? When does the desire to expand become more about proving something than about true need? And at what cost does that expansion come for those who already call that land home? Neon fire, fiddles, and a mad emperor. Have you ever wondered what happens when immense power lands in the hands of someone truly unpredictable? That's a question Rome faced with Emperor Nero. He was a young man when he became leader, barely a teenager, inheriting an empire that stretched across the known world. At first, there was hope, a promise of a new era, but his rule would become etched in history, not for triumphs or peace, but for a terrifying event, the Great Fire of Rome. In the blistering summer of 64, a huge, hungry fire tore through the ancient city, burning for 6 long, agonizing days and then flaring up again. Homes, temples, markets, priceless artworks, everything turned to choking ash. Imagine your whole town, everything familiar, completely gone in a matter of days. People were terrified, losing loved ones, losing everything they owned, their entire lives uprooted. As Rome literally burned, whispers started about Nero, the emperor. Legend says he played his lyre like a small, ancient harp, watching the city burn from a safe distance, perhaps even composing a song about the destruction. It's hard to know if he actually did this, but the image stuck. An emperor so out of touch, so absorbed in his own art or madness, he might have found beauty in such chaos. Here's the thing about disaster. People look for answers, and often, for someone to blame. Nero tried to shift the blame, picking on a small, new religious group called Christians, leading to terrible persecution, but many believed he was secretly responsible for the fire, perhaps even starting it to clear space for his incredibly lavish new palace, the Golden House, which he planned to build right in the devastated heart of Rome. Think about it like this. Imagine if someone in charge of a huge school project completely messed up, then instead of fixing it, they blamed a small group of quiet kids, and then used the project money to build themselves the fanciest, most over-the-top study room imaginable. It feels so unfair, doesn't it? And it makes you deeply question that person's leadership and even their sanity. Nero's story shows us how easily leadership can twist, how a person with unchecked authority can lose touch with reality, and how devastating that can be for millions. It wasn't just buildings that burned, it was trust, hope, and the very idea of a just ruler. His time reminds us of a tough truth. Power doesn't just grant control, it truly reveals who a person is. It shows us the deep human need for leaders who are not just strong, but also kind, and who genuinely care about the people they serve. Because when compassion burns away, all that's left, sometimes, is ash and a lasting memory of madness. The Great Fire of Rome, who really started it? Can you imagine Rome, a city of millions, suddenly swallowed by an unstoppable wall of fire? This isn't just a story, it's a terrifying moment from history. Back in 64 AD, for 6 days and 7 nights, the flames raged, devouring neighborhoods, turning grand buildings into ash, and leaving thousands homeless and heartbroken. The air would have been thick with smoke, and the sounds of collapsing structures and desperate cries would have filled the night. It was a disaster so immense, it felt like the very heart of the empire was being ripped out. But as the smoke cleared, another kind of fire began to burn, the fire of suspicion. Who could have caused such devastation? Here's the thing about huge tragedies. People want answers, they need someone to blame, and the finger quickly pointed at Emperor Nero. Stories spread like wildfire themselves, saying he fiddled while Rome burned, or even that he started it on purpose to clear land for a new palace. But here's the problem. There's no real proof. Nero, feeling the pressure, needed a scapegoat. So, he blamed a small, misunderstood group of people, the Christians. They were easy targets, seen as strange and secretive, and that's why it matters. Nero's actions led to cruel persecutions, punishing innocent people for a crime they didn't commit. Think about it like this. Imagine something goes wrong in your class. Maybe a project gets ruined, and everyone immediately blames the new kid, even if they had nothing to do with it. The fear and confusion make it easy to pick on someone different. So, who really started the Great Fire? We still don't know for sure. Rome was full of wooden buildings, narrow streets, and open flames for cooking and heating. A simple accident could have grown out of control very quickly. Sometimes, the most tragic events aren't caused by evil plots, but by chance, combined with a city built in a way that made it vulnerable. This reminds us that history isn't always a simple puzzle with one clear answer. Often, it's a tangled web of events, fears, and desperate choices, where blame is easier to cast than truth is to find. 4 emperors in 1 year. Chaos after Nero. Have you ever thought about what happens when the very top of a huge, powerful system suddenly breaks down? What if the person in charge disappears, and there's no clear plan for who comes next? Imagine the biggest empire the world had ever seen, Rome, suddenly facing that exact terrifying moment. After Emperor Nero's death, a deep, unsettling fear gripped the city. It wasn't just sadness, it was the chilling sense that everything they knew was about to unravel. For centuries, Rome had been mostly stable, with emperors ruling for many years, but now, the city faced something truly frightening. A sudden, wide-open struggle for power, a vacuum that swallowed up certainty. In just one single year, an almost unbelievable 4 different men claimed to be emperor. First came Galba, an old general, who tried to bring back order, but his rule was short, ending swiftly in betrayal and violence. Then Otho took his place, lasting only a few months before facing defeat in a brutal civil war. Next, Vitellius stepped up, but his time was even briefer, marked by more bloodshed and chaos in the streets of Rome itself. Each change meant more fighting, more soldiers clashing, more doubt poisoning the hearts of ordinary citizens. Think about it like this. Imagine your favorite sports team, but the coach changes every single game, and each new coach demands a completely different strategy and insults the last one. How confusing and scary would that be? No one would know the plan, who to listen to, or if they were even playing the same game. For the Roman people, it was far worse. It was their very lives and futures at stake. They watched their beloved city, their mighty empire, feel like it was tearing itself apart from the inside. The idea of a stable, strong Rome, which they had always known, suddenly seemed like a distant, fading dream. The very ground beneath their feet felt unsteady. This was a harsh, painful lesson. Without clear and steady leadership, without a shared path, even the mightiest empire can find itself utterly lost in a deep, dark wilderness of chaos and despair. And sometimes, the most destructive battles are not fought with outside enemies, but within the hearts and minds of a divided people. Vespasian brings order. A soldier emperor steps up. Have you ever felt completely lost, like everything around you was falling apart? Imagine that feeling for an entire empire. That's how Rome felt after Emperor Nero. It plunged into a dark, confusing time. 4 different men fought to be emperor in just 1 year. This was brutal civil war. Cities burned, trust vanished, and people lived in fear, wondering if Rome was crumbling. What Rome stood for seemed to shatter. So here's what happened. From that terrifying chaos stepped a man named Vespasian. He wasn't born into a fancy family or known for being charming. He was a soldier, a general, someone who knew how to get things done, not how to put on a show. He understood the struggle of everyday life, not just the politics of the palace. Think of it like a sports team. After a really tough loss, maybe even losing their captain, everyone is discouraged, confused, maybe blaming each other. No one knows who should take charge. But then, one player, maybe not the star, but a steady, reliable one, just starts picking up equipment, talking calmly, and showing everyone what to do next. That's a bit like what Vespasian did for Rome. He didn't make grand speeches about glory. Instead, he simply started rebuilding. He fixed Rome's money problems, brought discipline back to the army, and began constructing impressive buildings, like the Colosseum. These weren't just buildings, they were signs that Rome was strong again, that it wouldn't fall apart, and that's why it matters. Vespasian's rise reminds us that true strength often comes from plain hard work and a clear purpose, especially when things are at their worst. He didn't promise magic, he promised order, and he delivered. His steady hand brought a deeply needed sense of hope and peace back to an empire that felt truly broken. It shows us how important it is to have someone calm and dependable when the world feels like it's spinning out of control. The Colosseum rises, Rome's grand arena half. You ever wondered what it feels like to be part of something truly enormous, something that still stands centuries later, whispering stories of an age-long past? Imagine a place so grand, so massive, its very presence seemed to hold the breath of an entire city. This was Rome's Colosseum, a beating heart of stone, built for the people. By the empire, it wasn't just a giant stadium. The Colosseum was where Rome saw itself, reflected in the blood and drama of gladiatorial fights, in the terrifying dance between man and beast. It was a stage where life and death played out for the cheers of tens of thousands. Think about that intense feeling, packed shoulder to shoulder with 80,000 people, all focused on one spot, gasping, roaring, crying out together. Here's the thing, this immense arena wasn't just entertainment. Rome had suffered under a cruel emperor, Nero, who left the city feeling broken. The new emperor, Vespasian, built the Colosseum on the very land Nero had taken for his own selfish palace. This was a powerful statement. It was a gift, a healing gesture to a weary populace, meant to bring joy. It also reminded everyone of Rome's power and wealth, showing them the empire was strong again, and the emperor cared. Think about the feeling you get at a huge sports championship or a blockbuster movie premiere. The shared anticipation, the collective gasp, the way everyone experiences the same emotion. The Colosseum amplified that feeling beyond anything we can truly imagine. It bound people together, rich and poor, senator and slave, in a shared human experience of awe and terror, of belonging and excitement. And that's why it matters. The Colosseum stands today, a silent, enduring testament. It reminds us of humanity's deep, complicated need for spectacle, for shared stories, even for moments of controlled chaos. It shows us how leaders use grand gestures to rebuild trust and display authority, but it also quietly asks us to reflect on the cost of such glory, on the lives sacrificed, and on the raw, unfiltered desires of people yearning to feel connected, to be part of something larger than themselves. It's a structure of beauty and brutality, a stone echo of human nature itself. Vesuvius explodes, a city buried in ash. Have you ever wondered how fast life can change? 1 minute, everything is normal. The next, it's all gone. For the people of Pompeii, a lively Roman city near a mountain called Vesuvius, that change came in the most terrifying way. It was 79 AD. The sun shone down on busy streets. People bought food, kids played, bakers made bread. They lived under a beautiful, green mountain, not knowing it was a sleeping giant. Then, without much warning, Vesuvius roared awake. Ash, rock, and superheated gas exploded from its top. It wasn't just fire, it was a deadly, fast-moving cloud. Imagine you're in school, about to eat lunch or talk to a friend. Suddenly, everything freezes. Not just a pause, but a complete stop, with no way to restart. That's what happened in Pompeii. People were caught mid. Some ran, others huddled, holding loved ones close. The city was buried, not slowly by dust, but quickly and violently by ash. It was like time itself hit pause on an entire city. For centuries, Pompeii lay hidden, a ghost city under layers of ash. When people finally rediscovered it, they found an incredible, heartbreaking snapshot of Roman life. Houses with food still on tables, tools left exactly where they were used. The hollow spaces left by people's bodies, filled with plaster, show their final, desperate moments. It reminds us how fragile life is, how quickly even strong cities can disappear. But here's the thing, even in tragedy, the past can speak. It helps us understand what it truly meant to be Roman, living an ordinary life in an extraordinary empire, suddenly stopped by nature's overwhelming power. And that, in a way, makes those lost lives unforgettable. Trajan's empire, Rome's biggest, best days. Have you ever had a moment when everything just felt right, like you were standing on top of the world? For the Roman Empire, such a feeling truly arrived with Emperor Trajan. This wasn't just a good time. It was Rome's golden age, a period when its borders stretched further than ever before, reaching into distant deserts and across mighty rivers. Imagine a map of the ancient world, and Rome simply covered more of it than any other power. It wasn't just about size, though. It was a time when the empire felt strong, stable, and genuinely successful, almost untouchable. Under Rome built incredible structures that still stand today, like his famous column, telling stories of victories in stone. People across the empire generally felt safe. Trade flowed freely, bringing wealth and new ideas from far-off places. There was a deep sense that the empire was working as it should, like a massive, complex machine, all the gears turning perfectly and powerfully. It was the height of Roman achievement, the moment when all their grand ambitions seemed to bloom. But here's the thing about peaks, about those moments when you feel truly at your best. They are amazing, bright, and full of glory. Yet, deep down, we often know they can't last forever. Like climbing to the highest point of a mountain. The view is breathtaking, and you feel invincible, but you also know the only way to go from there is down. This wasn't a time of trouble or fear, but a quiet understanding must have settled in some hearts. How do you keep growing when you're already so big? How do you maintain such perfection? It's a powerful, almost sad beauty. This peak, It reminds us that even the grandest stories have chapters that eventually turn, no matter how brilliant they once were. It's a moment of wonder, but also a whisper of change. Hadrian's Wall, building a giant border. Have you ever wondered why people build walls? Not just for houses, but massive lines of stone stretching across entire countries. That's exactly what Emperor Hadrian did, long ago, in a wild, windswept land at the very edge of the Roman Empire, a place we now call northern England. He felt Rome needed a clear boundary, a strong, undeniable line etched in stone to mark its furthest reach. This wasn't just a simple barrier, it was Hadrian's Wall, a physical declaration meant to guard the northern frontier of Roman Britain. It was built to keep out the tribes from the north, people the Romans saw as untamed and threatening. It was Rome's way of saying, this far and no further. Imagine the effort. Roman soldiers, far from home, facing biting winds and harsh terrain, spent years building this 80-mile-long monument. They hauled huge, rough stones, dug deep foundations, and worked day after day, driven by a deep, aching need for safety and control. It wasn't just about stopping attacks, though that was part of it. It was also about feeling secure, knowing where their ordered world ended and the unknown began. It's a bit like when you set a firm boundary with a friend, saying, "This is my space," or when you build a fence around a cherished garden to keep out anything that might harm it. This wall was that boundary, that fence, for an entire empire. Hadrian's Wall still stands today, a powerful, silent witness. It reminds us of Rome's incredible power, its ambition to shape the very land, but it also whispers of a quiet fear, a worry about what lay beyond their control, in the wild, untamed spaces. For all its strength and might, the wall was also a monument to division, a giant scar across the landscape. It prompts us to think, even when we build something to protect, does it always bring true peace, or does it simply separate, creating an us and a them? The wall asks us, even now, what we gain and what we lose when we try to draw such a hard line in the world. The Antonine Plague. Sickness sweeps the empire. Have you ever thought about how something you can't even see could bring an entire mighty empire to its knees? Around 165 AD, Rome faced exactly that. An invisible enemy arrived, a terrible sickness, likely smallpox, and it spread like wildfire. Soldiers returning from war, instead of bringing victory, unknowingly carried this deadly disease back home. It swept through cities and towns, infecting everyone, rich, poor, young, and old. Imagine your bustling city suddenly quiet, filled with fear and sorrow, not enough healthy people to bury the dead, or even to work the fields and keep food coming. The mighty Roman Empire, which felt so strong and untouchable, began to crack under this invisible pressure. It's like a tiny, unseen computer virus getting into a huge, powerful network. Suddenly, the whole system malfunctions, slowing down and breaking important parts. This wasn't just a few people getting sick. It was the entire Roman world getting deeply ill. Doctors tried, but couldn't stop it. Prayers offered little comfort, as the sickness kept taking lives. That deep, creeping fear made many doubt everything they thought they knew about their strong empire. The Antonine Plague teaches us that even the biggest, most powerful human achievements are delicate. Our lives, even the grandest stories, depend on a fragile balance, especially our health. It shows how quickly a whole world can change, and how deeply connected we all are, even to the unseen forces around us. It was a quiet, heartbreaking lesson in humility for the proudest empire. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king's wisdom. Have you ever felt like everything around you was totally out of control? Like the world was just happening to you, and there was nothing you could do? Imagine being the most powerful person in the world, the Roman emperor, with wars, plagues, and massive problems every single day. That was Marcus Aurelius. He carried the weight of an empire. But here's the thing, he wasn't just a tough leader, he was a deep thinker, a philosopher. He wrote down his thoughts, not for fame, but for himself. To find peace in a demanding world. His big idea, what he taught himself, was about focusing on what you can truly control. You can't stop the rain, or what other people say about you, or even the difficult things that just happen in life. These things are outside your power, but you can control how you react to them. You control your thoughts. You control your actions. This way of thinking is called Stoicism. It's about building strength from the inside, facing life's storms with a calm heart, knowing your inner self remains steady. Think of it like this. Your mind is like a garden. You can't stop weeds from appearing, from worries or frustrations, but you decide which ones you pull out and which flowers you choose to water. If someone says something mean to you at school, that's a weed in your mental garden. You can let it make you upset, or you can acknowledge it, decide it's not worth your energy, and shift your focus to the good things in your day. This simple act helps you build lasting resilience. Marcus Aurelius understood that true power isn't about ruling an empire. It's about ruling yourself, your own mind, your own reactions. His ancient wisdom still matters deeply to us today. When the world outside feels loud and chaotic, the most important peace we find is within ourselves. It's a gentle, powerful reminder that we always have a choice in how we see things, how we respond, and how we protect our quiet inner peace, no matter the storms. End of an era. The Pax Romana fades away. Have you ever felt a long, peaceful quiet suddenly start to shift, like the end of a perfect summer day, when the light begins to change? For about 200 years, Rome knew something incredible, the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. Imagine a time when vast lands were mostly free from war, when trade flowed easily, and people generally felt safe within the empire's huge borders. It was a golden age, a deep breath after centuries of conflict. But even the strongest foundations can start to crack. And here's the thing about peace. It's often more fragile than we think. Around 180 CE, with the death of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, that long, sunny day for Rome began to cloud over. The reasons were many and tangled. There were new threats from outside, fierce tribes pushing at Rome's edges. Inside, things grew complicated. Leaders struggled for power, the economy wobbled, and a quiet whisper of worry began to spread across the empire. Think of it like a perfectly balanced mobile hanging in your room. For a long time, it just spins gently, all the pieces in harmony. But then, one small piece gets nudged, or a string phrase. Suddenly, the whole thing starts to wobble. It doesn't crash right away, but you can see the balance is gone. That's what was happening to the Pax Romana. The great peace wasn't shattered in an instant. Instead, it slowly faded, like a grand song playing softer and softer, until only an echo remains. This period reminds us that even the most stable times are precious. It shows us that change, sometimes slow and quiet, always comes. It leaves us with a feeling of something lost, a long sigh for an era of peace that couldn't last forever. Commodus, a crazy emperor, and the end of good times. Have you ever seen something truly strong, something that seemed perfect, begin to show its first tiny crack, like a sturdy old wall, and then suddenly, a thin line appears? You know it's there. Rome had a long run of good emperors, a time people called the Pax Romana, Roman peace. Things were stable. But then came Commodus. He was the son of Marcus Aurelius, who was one of the wisest emperors Rome ever had. Everyone hoped Commodus would follow in his father's footsteps, carrying on that great legacy. But that's not what happened. Commodus was more interested in gladiator fights and demanding people worship him as a god, not in actually running the empire. He acted like a spoiled kid who inherited everything and then just messed it all up. Here's the thing. Imagine if your school principal suddenly decided to spend all their time playing video games in their office, totally ignoring classes, ignoring the teachers, and demanding everyone call them King Game Master. Things would fall apart pretty fast, right? That's kind of what happened with Commodus. The empire needed a leader, but it got an entertainer. He saw himself as Hercules, a mighty hero, but his actions were far from that. He fought in the arena, not as a strong leader inspiring his people, but as an emperor who had forgotten his real job. The people watched, confused and a little scared. The respect for Rome's leaders started to fade, like a bright color washing out of an old cloth. His time as emperor wasn't just bad, it was a sad turning point. It showed that even the greatest empires can be fragile, that one person's bad choices can start a long, hard decline. The golden age, the good times of peace, began to slip away. It's a quiet reminder that being in charge isn't just about having power. It's about wisdom, doing your duty, and understanding the heavy weight of responsibility. And when that weight is dropped, sometimes everything cracks a little, and it's hard to put back together. 5 emperors in a year, more trouble, more fights. Have you ever been on a team where no one could agree on who was in charge? Imagine that feeling, but for an entire empire. That's what happened in Rome, during a time when 5 different men claimed to be emperor in just 1 year. Here's the thing. Each man had an army behind him, ready to fight for his claim to the throne. This wasn't about good leadership or making Rome better. It was about power. And when so many people want power at the same time, it can feel like everything is falling apart. Think about it. One day you have one emperor with his plans and his laws. The next, he's gone, maybe even killed, and a new one steps in, changing everything again. It was a dizzying, terrifying merry-go-round of command. For regular Roman citizens, this meant constant worry. Who could they trust? Would their taxes suddenly go up? Would their sons be forced to join an army fighting for a leader who might not even be alive next month? It was like trying to live in a house where the foundation was always shaking. There was no real peace, no sense of things being okay for long. The very heart of the empire was beating with fear and confusion. It's a bit like if your school kept getting new principals every few weeks. Every time, new rules, new ideas, new ways of doing things. You'd never know what to expect. You'd feel unsettled, anxious, maybe even angry. That constant change makes it hard for anyone to feel safe or stable. Rome, once so powerful and steady, was learning a harsh lesson. When leaders are too busy fighting each other for control, they forget about the people they're supposed to serve. A kingdom, or any group really, needs a steady hand. It needs people to trust that tomorrow will not bring complete chaos. Without that trust, even the strongest walls can start to crumble from the inside. Soldier emperors take charge. The Severan dynasty. Have you ever felt like things were spinning out of control, and you just wished someone strong would step up and fix it? That's how Rome felt after a confusing time. For years, emperors were chosen in different ways by family or the Senate. But after a difficult period, the whispers grew loud. Maybe the army should decide. Maybe those who fought for Rome should also lead it. And that's exactly what happened with the Severan dynasty. These weren't emperors born into quiet luxury or trained in political speeches. They were often hardened soldiers, commanders who had earned their stripes on dusty battlefields far from Rome. Septimius Severus I rose through military ranks. He understood soldiers, knew they held real power. So, he paid them well and gained their fierce loyalty. It was a new kind of rule, where the army's strength became the emperor's strength. Think about it like this. Imagine your school council is usually elected, but then there's a big problem, like a security scare, and suddenly, the captain of the football team, who is strong and respected, steps in and makes all decisions. He keeps order well, but he's not elected, and he might not listen to everyone. He solves the immediate problem with force and clear commands. That's what soldier emperors were like. They brought order, but it came at a cost. Focus shifted from wise leaders or people's will to a soldier's sword. It was immense pressure, a desperate cling to control. The empire was so vast, so often threatened, that it seemed only a soldier could hold it together. But what happens to an empire's heart when it's always at war? Leaders always looking to the next battle, not peaceful laws. Peace became a fragile dream, easily shattered. And so, Rome, once a republic of ideals, leaned heavily on tired soldiers, wondering if strength alone was enough to truly save it. Barracks, emperors, generals grabbing power fast. Have you ever thought about what happens when the very people meant to protect a country start fighting over who gets to rule it? Imagine ancient Rome, a place famous for its strong laws and powerful leaders, suddenly falling into deep confusion. This is exactly what happened during a tough time in Roman history, when generals, backed by their loyal armies, began seizing the emperor's crown for themselves. We call these figures the barracks emperors. Here's the thing, Rome was enormous. Its vast borders needed strong armies everywhere to keep enemies out. But when an emperor died, or even if one was still in power but seemed weak, the generals leading these armies saw their chance. They would convince their soldiers that they should be emperor, often promising them more money and rewards. So, one general might march on Rome, take the throne by force, only for another general, leading a different army in another part of the empire, to do the same thing just a few years later. It was like a constant, brutal game of musical chairs, but the prize was the highest office in the world, and the cost was often war and death. Think about a big company where the CEO is always being replaced by a popular manager from a different department, not because of skill, but because that manager has the most friends. Every few months, there's a new boss, new rules, and everyone feels unsettled. No real work gets done. That's a bit like what Rome faced. Leadership changed hands so often, sometimes every few months, that the whole empire became incredibly weak and vulnerable. There was no steady hand, no long-term plan. It was a time of deep fear and constant uncertainty for ordinary people. Power wasn't about who could lead best or make the wisest decisions. It was about who had the biggest, most loyal army and the will to use it. And the people of Rome, they yearned for peace. They longed for a stable leader to guide their massive empire. But all they saw was an endless parade of military strongmen, each grabbing the scepter, only to lose it just as fast. It truly shows us how fragile peace can be when ambition shadows the need for unity and calm leadership. Money problems. Rome's economy starts to crumble. Have you ever thought about the coins in your pocket, or the bills your parents use? They feel real, solid. You trust that they can buy you things, right? But what if that trust, the very idea of what money is, slowly started to disappear? For hundreds of years, Roman money was strong. Their silver coins, called denarii, were truly worth the silver inside them. People believed in that value, and it made trade easy across the vast empire. But Rome was immense, and running it cost an unbelievable amount. Years of wars, maintaining huge armies, and constructing grand buildings, all needed mountains of cash. And over time, the emperors started to run low on actual gold and silver. Instead of admitting the problem, they began doing something secret, something that would slowly poison the empire from within. They started making new coins, but with less and less real silver. They mixed in cheaper, common metals like copper or bronze. The coin looked the same on the outside. It still said it was a denarius, but its actual, precious metal worth was shrinking. Think of it like making a delicious glass of lemonade. If you keep adding more and more water to the same amount of lemon and sugar, you get more liquid. But each sip tastes weaker, less fulfilling. That's what happened to Roman money. Soon, people weren't fooled. They noticed prices for everyday things like a loaf of bread or a simple tunic shot up. A farmer wouldn't trade his hard-earned grain for coins that felt almost worthless. Soldiers, who risked their lives, felt cheated when their pay couldn't buy enough food for their families. This wasn't a sudden, dramatic crash, but a slow, painful unraveling. It was a creeping sickness that eroded the very foundation of trust. Trust in the government, trust in the economy, and even trust in each other. The quiet sorrow of an empire realizing its most basic tool for connection, money, was slowly failing them, paving a path of uncertainty and decline. Barbarians at the gates. Pressure on Rome's borders. Have you ever felt like you're guarding something important, trying to keep it safe, maybe a secret, or a special toy? Rome, for centuries, felt this on a massive scale. For all its power and glory, the Roman Empire was like a giant island surrounded by a vast, restless sea. On the shores of that sea were groups of people the Romans called barbarians. Now, barbarian might sound harsh, but for Romans, it just meant anyone not part of their world, often those living beyond their borders. Here's the thing. These groups weren't always monsters. Sometimes they were looking for new land, escaping their own troubles, or just trying to trade. But their presence, their sheer numbers, created immense, constant pressure on Rome's long borders. Imagine holding your breath for a very long time. That's what it was like for Rome, a constant strain, day after day, year after year. Think about a strong wall, built to keep things out. It stands tall and firm. But what if, every day, little drops of water kept hitting that wall, over and over, for hundreds of years? Not a giant flood, just a steady, relentless drumming. Eventually, those tiny drops, through sheer persistence, wear away the stone, weakening it bit by bit. That's a bit like what happened to Rome. The tribes weren't always launching massive invasions. Often, it was smaller raids, groups trying to cross, demanding land, or just moving restlessly near Roman territory. This unending vigilance, the need to always be ready, always sending soldiers to far-flung outposts, slowly drained the empire. It wasn't just about battles. It was about the worry, the cost, the exhaustion. It reminds us that even the most powerful structures can crumble, not just from one huge blow, but from the relentless, grinding pressure of countless smaller forces, chipping away at their strength until, one day, the cracks become too deep. It makes you think how even small, persistent pressures can change everything over time. Diocletian splits the empire. Two halves, one goal half. You ever had a project so huge, so overwhelming, that you just couldn't manage it alone? Imagine that feeling, but amplified 1,000 times, for an entire empire. That's how Rome felt in the late 200s AD. It was like a giant, worn-out body, stretched too thin, trying to hold itself together. Attacks came from every side. Rebellions popped up inside the borders. One emperor simply couldn't be everywhere, couldn't see everything. It was too much for any one person to bear. Then came Diocletian. He was a smart, strong leader, and he looked at this impossible situation with a heavy heart. He loved Rome, truly. He didn't want to see it fall apart, not completely. So, he made a drastic, painful choice. He decided to split the Roman Empire in two, not because he wanted to destroy it, but because he hoped it would save it. He cut it into a Western Roman Empire and an Eastern Roman Empire. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a massive, beautiful old house, but it's so big, with so many rooms, that one person can't possibly clean and fix everything. The roof leaks here, a window is broken there, and a wall needs paint somewhere else. If you try to do it all yourself, you'll burn out, and the house will crumble. But if you get a partner, and you each take half the house, suddenly it feels manageable. You can focus, defend your part, and work together on the big problems. That's what Diocletian hoped for. Two halves, each with its own emperor, sometimes even a junior emperor for each. They would each have their own capital cities, their own governments, their own armies, but the big idea, the dream of Rome, would still be one. It was a desperate act, born from a deep love and a fierce will to survive. It showed that sometimes, to keep something alive, you have to let go of its old form, and bravely carve a new path, even if it hurts. It was a choice made not from weakness, but from a profound understanding of how to endure. The great persecution, targeting Christians in Rome. Have you ever felt like you believed something so strongly, but everyone around you thought it was wrong, even dangerous? Imagine a time in ancient Rome. Most people worshipped many gods, praying to Jupiter for thunder or Venus for love. But a new group was growing. The Christians. They believed in one God, and they said all other gods were false. This was a huge deal, a big change. For the Romans, this wasn't just about religion. Here's the thing, it was about loyalty. Refusing to offer sacrifices to Roman gods or the emperor was seen as rejecting the state itself. It was like being on a team where everyone wears the same uniform and cheers. But a new group refuses to join in, choosing their own path. People whispered about Christians. They met in secret, and that made Romans really suspicious. They thought Christians were doing strange things, or that they hated society because they wouldn't join public festivals. Then came what we call the Great Persecution. Emperor Diocletian decided to try and crush Christianity. Orders went out across the empire. Churches were torn down. Holy books were burned. Christians were forced to deny their faith, or they would face terrible consequences. It was a time of intense fear and sorrow. Neighbors sometimes turned on neighbors. People had to make an incredibly hard choice. Give up what they believed in, or suffer for it. But here's what happened. Many refused to deny their God. They chose suffering. This shows us how powerful a belief can be, how deeply it can settle into a person's soul. It makes you think, doesn't it, about what it really means to stand firm in your convictions, even when the whole world seems against you, even when it feels like your very identity is under attack. It's a story about the quiet strength of the human spirit, and the bravery of holding on to hope, even in the darkest, most frightening times. Diocletian steps down. A rare emperor's choice. Have you ever thought about what it means to truly let go? Imagine being the most powerful person in the world, the emperor of a vast and mighty empire, with armies at your command, and endless riches. Most people would cling to that power forever, wouldn't they? They'd fight, scheme, even kill to keep it. But in the year 305 AD, Emperor Diocletian did something almost nobody in Roman history had ever done before. He walked away. Diocletian wasn't sick, he wasn't overthrown, and he certainly wasn't forced out. He simply chose to step down. This was a choice that stunned everyone, because for centuries, Roman emperors rarely left their throne alive. His decision wasn't just about his own peace. It was an attempt to set an example, to show that even the highest office could be surrendered for the good of the empire. He had brought order to a chaotic Rome, fixing its economy and stabilizing its borders. He believed his job was done, and it was time for new leaders. It's a bit like being the star player on a championship team, someone everyone counts on. You're amazing, and you could keep playing, winning more awards. But then, you decide to retire at the peak of your game, not because you have to, but because you feel it's the right moment. You want to give others a chance, or perhaps you want to prove that the team can succeed even without you. It takes a special kind of strength to make that choice, to put the greater good, or your own inner peace, Above staying in the spotlight, Diocletian's act teaches us a quiet but profound lesson. True power isn't always about how much you hold on to. Sometimes it's about the courage to release it. It's a reflection on leadership, on knowing when your time is truly up, and on finding wisdom in stepping aside. His choice whispers across the centuries, reminding us that letting go can be one of the most powerful things a person can ever do. Constantine sees a sign. A new leader rises. Have you ever faced a huge moment, so uncertain, that you wished for a sign to point the way? Imagine being a powerful general, facing a huge battle. This is where we find Constantine, long ago, when gods and omens felt very real. The year was 312 AD. Rome was in chaos, divided, with leaders fighting for control. Constantine was about to face a much larger army. Everything felt on the line. Then, the story goes, he saw it. A vision in the sky, a glowing cross, a symbol of Christ. With it, a message. In this sign, conquer. Most Romans worshipped many gods. Christianity was new, often persecuted. But Constantine, facing overwhelming odds, saw this sign and believed. He ordered his soldiers to put this Christian symbol on their shields. And here's the thing, he won. A huge victory against all expectations. It's like when you're super nervous about a big test, and someone gives you a lucky charm, or you see a good omen, and it just settles you. You feel a boost of confidence. That charm didn't change the test, but it changed how you felt facing it. Constantine's vision was more than a charm. It was a deep shift in how he saw the world. This wasn't just a battle win. It was a turning point for Rome, for history. After that victory, Constantine made Christianity legal across the Roman Empire. Think about it. One moment, one man's belief, from a sign he saw, slowly began to change the religion of an entire civilization. It guided its path for centuries. It reminds us how a powerful belief, born from a desperate moment, can ripple outwards, reshaping everything we know. Milvian Bridge, a battle won with faith. Have you ever faced a moment so big, so scary, that you wondered if you could ever win? A moment where everything felt stacked against you. Imagine that feeling, but 1,000 times bigger, with an empire hanging in the balance. In the year 312 AD, two powerful Roman leaders, Constantine and Maxentius, stood ready to fight for control of Rome itself. Maxentius had the bigger army, the home advantage. All reasons pointed to his victory. Constantine, on the other hand, was outnumbered, far from his own lands. It must have felt like looking up at a mountain, knowing you had to climb it, but having no idea how. But here's what happened. The night before the battle, Constantine experienced something extraordinary. Some say it was a vivid dream, others a shining sign in the sky. He saw a symbol, one that represented Christ, the Chiro, and with it, he heard a message. In this sign, conquer. It was a whisper of hope in the darkness, a sudden spark of certainty in a world of doubt. This wasn't just a military order, it was a deeply personal, spiritual moment. He ordered his soldiers to paint this new symbol onto their shields. Imagine the feeling among them. One day, they served the old Roman gods. The next, they carried a brand new symbol of an unknown deity, one that their leader promised would bring victory. It took incredible trust, a leap of faith for everyone involved. Think about a time you've been on a team, maybe in a game, and you're losing badly. Everyone's heads are down. Then, the coach says something, or one teammate makes an amazing play, and suddenly, everyone believes again. That belief, that shared surge of confidence, can totally change the game. For Constantine's army, that symbol and that vision were their turning point. When they charged into battle the next day, it wasn't just swords and spears fighting, it was faith. They fought with a fierce, quiet certainty, believing in something beyond themselves, something unseen. They won, against all expectations, a victory that shocked the Roman world. This battle didn't just decide who would rule Rome, it marked the beginning of Christianity's powerful rise within the empire, changing history forever. It reminds us how a single belief, a single moment of conviction, can echo through centuries, shaping the destiny of millions. Sometimes, the most powerful forces aren't physical, but reside in the human heart. Edict of Milan, freedom for Christians at Lascaux. You imagine living in fear, just because of what you believe in your heart. For hundreds of years in the Roman Empire, this was the reality for Christians. They met in secret, whispers carrying their prayers, always afraid of being discovered and punished. Their faith was seen as a challenge to Roman gods and emperors, and the consequences were often terrible. But then, a shift happened. A quiet, profound change that echoed through history. In the year 313, two emperors, Constantine and Licinius, came together to issue something called the Edict of Milan. And here's the thing, it wasn't about making Christianity the official religion of Rome yet. Instead, it was about granting religious freedom to everyone. It meant Christians, and people of any faith, could practice their beliefs openly, without fear of persecution. Think about how that would feel. Imagine you're passionate about a certain hobby, maybe playing an instrument, or drawing, or being part of a specific club, and suddenly, you've been told you can't do it anymore, or you'll get into serious trouble. You'd have to hide your talent, practice in secret, and always worry about being caught. Now, imagine one day a new rule comes out, saying everyone is free to pursue their passions. No one will be judged or punished for what they love to do. That feeling of a huge weight lifting, that sudden, incredible freedom to just be yourself. That's what the Edict of Milan meant for Christians. It was a powerful moment, not just for Christians, but for the very idea of human rights. It showed that even in a vast empire, the idea of tolerance could take root. It planted a seed that grew into a world where personal belief matters, reminding us that true strength often comes from allowing people the quiet dignity of their own faith. Constantinople, building a new capital for Rome. Have you ever thought about what it would take to move the very heart of something huge, something as old and powerful as the Roman Empire? Imagine someone deciding that Rome, the ancient city everyone called eternal, wasn't the best place to lead the world anymore. That's exactly what Emperor Constantine did. He picked a new place, a small Greek town called Byzantium, and then built it up into a grand city, renaming it Constantinople, Constantine's city. This wasn't just moving an office. It was like deciding your family home, full of generations of stories and memories, no longer quite fit, and building a whole new one, hundreds of miles away. Why would he do something so big? Here's the thing. The Roman Empire had grown enormous, stretching across continents. The old capital in the west was far from many of the new challenges and vibrant areas in the east. It was also a time when the empire was becoming Christian, and old Rome, with all its pagan temples and ancient traditions, felt like a leftover from a different era. This was a chance for a fresh start, a new identity. Think of it like this. If you have a huge group project, and you realize your current meeting spot is too hard for half the group to get to, or it just doesn't have the right tools anymore, you might move to a new library or a new friend's house. It's still the same project, the same people, but the new location changes how you work, how you connect, and how you see things. It gives everything a new energy. So, this new city, built on a perfect peninsula, became a strong fortress, a busy hub for trade, and a powerful symbol of a renewed empire. It was Rome, but a new kind of Rome, looking eastward, embracing new ideas, and trying to hold on to its greatness in a world that wouldn't stop changing. This choice reminds us that even the most lasting things can shift their center, seeking new beginnings. It was a huge step, a deep breath taken by an entire civilization, hoping for a future where its heart could beat stronger and more centrally, touching everything, and that's why it matters. Council of Nicaea, deciding what Christians believe. Have you ever wondered what happens when people deeply disagree about something super important, like the very foundations of what they believe? Imagine a time when Christianity was growing fast, but different groups had very different ideas about who Jesus really was. This wasn't just small talk. It was tearing communities apart, even threatening the stability of the entire Roman Empire. So, in 325 AD, the Emperor Constantine, who had just made Christianity legal, did something huge. He gathered hundreds of bishops, important church leaders, from all over the vast Roman world. They met in a city called Nicaea. Here's what happened. Their main job was to decide, once and for all, on the fundamental truths of Christian faith. The biggest argument was about Jesus. Was he truly God, just like God the Father, or was he created by God, maybe a little less divine? This might sound like a small detail, but for them, it changed everything about their worship, their prayers, their hope. Think about it like this. Imagine your favorite band. If half the band thinks they're a rock group, and the other half thinks they're a classical orchestra, they won't make much music together, right? Their whole identity and purpose would be confused. They need to agree on their core sound to even exist. That's a bit like what these leaders faced. They needed to find a common rhythm, a shared understanding of God. To to unite the many different Christian communities. After weeks of passionate debate, they finally agreed. They created the Nicene Creed, a statement of belief that is still recited in many churches today. It said that Jesus was one in being with God the Father. This meeting wasn't just a historical event. It was a moment where the very heart of a religion was defined. It shows us how beliefs, even ancient ones, are living things, shaped by intense human conversation and a deep longing to understand the divine. And that's why it matters. Julian the Apostate, trying to bring back old gods. Have you ever felt like you were the only one who remembered something truly special, something important that everyone else had forgotten? Imagine trying to bring back a favorite old game or tradition that all your friends have completely moved on from. That's a bit like what Emperor Julian tried to do with the heart of Rome. He lived at a time when Christianity was really taking root in the Roman Empire. Emperors before him had embraced it, and it was quickly becoming the main way people thought about the world, about God, and about life. But Julian felt differently, with a deep ache for the past. He loved the old Roman gods, the ones of Jupiter, Venus, and Mars, the gods of myths, ancient rituals, and powerful stories. To him, these were not just tales. They were the very soul of Rome, what made it strong and unique. He believed that abandoning them for Christianity had weakened the empire. So, when he became emperor, he tried something truly daring, something that shocked many. He attempted to turn back the clock. He encouraged people to worship the old gods again, to offer sacrifices, and to celebrate the ancient festivals with passion. He didn't outlaw Christianity, but he made it much harder for Christians to have power or influence. It was like he was rowing with all his might against a powerful river current, trying to push Rome back upstream to a time that had already passed. Think of it like this. Imagine your school decides to completely switch from, say, using computers for everything to only using typewriters and paper because the principal believes it's how the school used to be great. It would be a huge effort, and most students and teachers would find it incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible, to go back. Julian's attempt was passionate, fueled by a deep love for what he saw as Rome's true, fading heritage. But the world had changed too much. Christianity had a powerful hold on people's hearts and minds. His reign was short, and when he died, his efforts quickly faded. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much can one person, even an emperor, truly change the direction of an entire society, especially when its soul has already begun to find new meaning? Sometimes, the river flows too strongly in one direction to be turned. Theodosius makes Christianity official, a new state religion. Have you ever thought about what happens when a whole empire, a huge group of people, suddenly changes what it believes in at its very core? For centuries, Rome had many gods. People worshipped Jupiter, Mars, Venus, a whole family of powerful beings. It was part of their daily life, their traditions, their very identity. But then, something shifted. Christianity, which started as a small, often persecuted group, began to grow. Its followers believed in one God, a different kind of faith, and they often faced danger for their beliefs. Imagine your school, for generations, has always celebrated certain holidays and traditions, with specific symbols and stories. Everyone knows them. Then, one day, the principal announces a new rule. From now on, only one set of holidays and stories will be officially recognized and celebrated by the whole school. All the other, older traditions are no longer the official ones. That's kind of what happened with Rome and Christianity. In 380 CE, Emperor Theodosius I made a massive decision. He issued an edict, a big official announcement, that made Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire. This wasn't just saying Christianity was allowed, it was saying it was now the only acceptable religion for the empire. It was a huge moment, a turning point where the Roman world, which had been so diverse in its gods, suddenly pledged its loyalty to one faith. Think about the weight of that. It wasn't just about a change in worship, it was a change in laws, in culture, in how people saw themselves and their place in the universe. Imagine your entire community, for hundreds of years, following a path, and then suddenly, the map changes completely. The old temples, once filled with worshippers, began to empty. New churches, once hidden, now stood proudly. This decision by Theodosius didn't just affect what people prayed to, it shaped how the empire would continue to crumble and rise in new forms. It was a quiet earthquake, felt deep within the soul of Rome, redirecting its spirit towards a new, unknown future. What happens to a people when their gods shift, when their deepest beliefs become fixed by law? It's a question that echoes through history, showing us how deeply faith can connect to power, and how a single decision can redefine an entire world. Rome divides forever. East and West go their own ways. Have you ever seen something really big, something you thought would last forever, slowly start to pull apart? That's kind of what happened to the Roman Empire. For hundreds of years, it was this massive, powerful force, stretching across so many lands. But here's the thing, it just became too huge to manage from one place, one ruler. Imagine trying to keep track of 1,000 different things all at once, from different corners of the world. It's impossible, right? So, the leaders made a choice. They decided to split the empire into two main parts, the West and the East. It wasn't a choice made lightly. The western part, with its famous capital in Rome, mostly spoke Latin. The eastern part, far away in Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul, mostly spoke Greek. They developed different ways of looking at the world, different styles of art, and even slightly different beliefs in some areas. It was like two friends who grew up together but slowly found their own paths, their own interests, until they were almost strangers, even if they shared a history. Think of it like a huge, old tree. For centuries, it stands tall, its roots deeply connected, but over time, maybe a huge storm comes, or a disease starts on one side. The tree tries to hold on, but eventually, a main branch just splits away. It's still part of the tree's history, but now it's its own separate piece, facing its own challenges. The Western Roman Empire, weakened by constant attacks and money troubles, eventually crumbled. But the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, kept going strong for another 1,000 years. A bright flame in a different corner of the world. It's a quiet thought, isn't it? How something so mighty and unified can slowly, almost silently, become two different things. It reminds us that even the strongest bonds, the biggest ideas, can change and shift over time. Sometimes, paths diverge, and what was once one becomes many, leaving behind echoes of a shared past, but charting entirely new futures. It's a sad kind of wisdom, seeing the world reshape itself. Goths crossed the river, a huge problem for Rome. Have you ever thought about what happens when a country, a whole way of life, meets something completely new, something that changes everything? For Rome, this moment came with a river, the Danube, and a desperate group of people called the Goths. Here's what happened. Around 376 CE, the Roman Empire was still powerful, but it had cracks. Far to the east, another scary group, the Huns, was sweeping across lands, pushing everyone in front of them. The Goths, a large people, were running for their lives from the Huns. They arrived at the Danube River, the big, natural border of the Roman Empire, and begged to be let in. They weren't looking for a fight, they were looking for safety, for refuge. So, Rome faced a huge choice: let them in, or leave them to the Huns. The Roman Emperor, Valens, decided to let them cross. He thought Rome could gain new farmers, new soldiers. But here's the problem: Rome handled it terribly. Instead of welcoming them properly, the Roman officials were greedy and cruel. They charged the Goths outrageous prices for food, even for dog meat, when they had plenty of their own grain. They broke families apart, selling Gothic children into slavery. Imagine you're new to a school, really needing help, and the people in charge ignore you, even steal your lunch money. How would you feel? You'd get angry. That's what happened. Their desperate hope turned into bitter rage. They had nowhere else to go, nowhere else to turn. So, these people, who just wanted peace, were pushed to fight against the empire that promised them safety. This wasn't just a border crossing. It was a wound, deep and open. It showed how even a mighty empire could fail its own values, how a strong government could make terrible mistakes. It reminds us that how we treat others, especially when they are vulnerable, can change the world in ways we might never expect. And sometimes, the biggest threats come not from outside, but from failures within. Adrianople, a devastating defeat for Rome. Have you ever felt like everything was going fine, and then, suddenly, one moment changed everything? For the mighty Roman Empire, that moment, one of many, but a truly huge one, happened at a place called Adrianople. It was a battle in the year 378 AD, where Rome faced an army of Goths, a group they honestly thought they could easily beat. Romans usually won. They had the best soldiers, the best tactics, and a deep, unspoken belief in their own power, in their destiny to conquer. But this time was different. terribly different. This wasn't just losing a battle. It felt like the very earth beneath their feet shifted. Their own emperor, Valens, was killed. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers, men who had marched under the eagle's standard, died on that brutal field. It was a complete disaster, a loss so total it sent ripples of shock and grief across the entire empire. Imagine the feeling that must have spread, the deep shock, the chilling fear that crept into every home, the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, they weren't invincible after all. The pride that had defined them for centuries began to crack. It's a bit like when you practice for a big sports game or a performance for weeks, feeling totally ready, totally confident. You know your team is the best, or you've rehearsed until you're perfect. And then, on the big day, everything just goes wrong. The other team surprises you with something totally new. You make mistakes you never thought you would, and you lose, badly. That feeling of disbelief, of how did this happen? That's what Adrianople was for Rome, but on a massive scale, shaking the very foundation of their power and how they saw themselves in the world. Adrianople showed that even the strongest, most organized powers can be broken. It proved that no matter how mighty you seem, misjudgments and overconfidence can lead to tragic, unforgettable ends. This battle became a wound that never truly healed, a deep scar that reminded Rome of its limits, of its vulnerability. It was a stark sign that the world was changing, and the old ways might not always work. Whether they were ready for that harsh truth or not, sometimes the most painful failures teach us the most profound lessons about strength, vulnerability, and the ever-changing realities of history. Alaric sacks Rome. The unthinkable happens. Have you ever believed something was so strong, so powerful, that it could never, ever be defeated? Like an ancient mountain or a giant unbreakable wall. For hundreds of years, the city of Rome was seen that way. It was more than just a city. It was the heart of a vast empire, a symbol of power and 1,000 years of history. People thought it was eternal, a place the gods themselves protected. But then, in the year 410 AD, something happened that sent shivers down the spines of everyone who heard it. A Goth leader named Alaric, with his Visigoth army, marched through the gates of Rome. They stayed for 3 days, not burning the city to the ground, but raiding it. They took valuable treasures, yes, but what they really took was Rome's sense of invincibility. This wasn't just a battle, it was a profound, painful shock. Imagine a really old, famous sports team, one that has won championships for generations, a team everyone says is unbeatable. And then, one day, a brand new team, an underdog, walks onto their home field and wins. Not just a win, but a stunning defeat that shakes everyone's belief in the unbeatable team. That's a little like how it felt. Here's the thing. Rome hadn't been attacked like this in almost 800 years. For Romans, this was a nightmare come true. It cracked the very idea of Rome's eternal strength. It proved that even the mightiest empires, the ones that seem to last forever, are still vulnerable. It was a moment that showed the world that change is constant, and even giants can stumble. And that's why it matters. It reminds us that nothing, no matter how grand, is truly forever. Honorius hides in Ravenna, an emperor who ran away. Imagine for a moment, standing at the edge of something huge, something about to fall apart. What do? Do you stand tall, or do you look for the safest place to hide? For Honorius, one of Rome's emperors, that choice came with a heavy, heartbreaking cost. He was emperor when the mighty city of Rome, which had stood for over 1,000 years, was truly in danger. Barbarian armies, hungry for power and riches, were closing in. Instead of staying in the capital, standing with his people, Honorius decided to move. He packed up his court and went to Ravenna. Now Ravenna wasn't just any city. It was surrounded by swamps and strong walls, making it incredibly difficult for an enemy to attack. It was a safe place, a fortress. But here's the thing. An emperor hiding in a fortress isn't leading an empire. It's like being the captain of a ship in a storm, but choosing to lock yourself in your cabin instead of being on deck, guiding your crew. Think about how that must have felt for the ordinary people of Rome. Their emperor, the very symbol of their strength and future, had left them. He had essentially retreated, seeking personal safety while the heart of the empire was exposed. This wasn't just a practical move, it was an emotional wound. It whispered to everyone that even their leader believed Rome couldn't be defended, that its glory was fading. This moment teaches us something important about leadership and courage. It shows that sometimes the biggest blows to an empire aren't always from a clash of swords. but from a loss of spirit. When a leader retreats, it doesn't just mean a change of location. It can mean a surrender of hope, a quiet signal that even the most powerful empire might be ready to crumble from within. It leaves you wondering what true strength really means. Vandals take North Africa, losing Rome's breadbasket. Imagine a huge, powerful city, full of people, depending on one main place for almost all its food. What happens if that place suddenly disappears? For ancient Rome, that main source was North Africa. It was like their giant farm, their breadbasket. All the grain needed to feed millions of people, to keep the city running, came from there. But then, a group called the Vandals arrived. They weren't just passing through. So here's what happened. In the 430s AD, these Vandals, led by a tough king named Eric, crossed into North Africa and slowly took control. This wasn't just a lost piece of land. It was Rome's lost lifeline. Think about it. If you can't feed your people, you can't keep an army strong, you can't keep order in your cities. People get hungry, they get restless, and the whole system starts to fall apart. Rome was already struggling with so many problems, and losing its main food supply was a devastating blow. It was like someone cutting off the oxygen to a patient who's already very sick. The empire relied on that grain, not just for hungry bellies, but for its very spirit. This loss whispered the truth. Rome was vulnerable. It's a bit like if your phone, which holds all your important contacts, school assignments, and lets you talk to your friends, suddenly stopped working, and you couldn't replace it. You'd feel cut off, wouldn't you? Disconnected from everything you need to function in your daily life. That's how Rome must have felt, but on a much, much bigger scale, affecting millions of lives. The Vandals taking North Africa wasn't just another battle lost. It was a slow, painful starvation of an empire. It showed how even the mightiest civilizations are fragile, how their power depends on basic needs being met, and when those needs are threatened, the grand structures can crumble. It reminds us that even with all the glory, the power, the art, a city still needs to eat. It's a quiet lesson in how the foundations of life, the things we often take for granted, are actually the most important of all. Attila the Hun, the scourge of God, arrives. Have you ever felt that shiver when a huge storm is heading straight for you, and there's just no way to stop it? You see the dark clouds, hear the distant rumble, and a real dread settles in. That feeling describes what the Roman Empire faced with Attila the Hun. He wasn't just another leader. He was a force so destructive, so relentless. People called him the scourge of God. Here's the thing. Rome was already tired. The empire was huge and had many problems within its borders. Then, from the eastern lands, Attila appeared. He was a brilliant fighter, yes, but he also spread total fear. His Huns were amazing on horseback, moving fast, hitting hard. They didn't just want land or gold. They wanted to simply destroy. For Romans, who believed their empire would last forever, Attila felt like a direct challenge to their very existence. It seemed like the world was truly ending. Imagine you're trying to fix something that's always breaking. You're tired. Then, a massive new problem pops up, something you never expected. That feeling of being completely overwhelmed, of having too much to handle, is a bit like Rome's struggle when Attila arrived. His attacks were more than just battles. They were a mental assault. He forced Rome to see its weaknesses, showing everyone that even the strongest empire could fall from fear. And that's why his arrival was such a deep, emotional turning point. It wasn't just about soldiers and swords. It was about the chilling truth that some forces are so powerful, they change history forever, leaving a lasting fear. It showed that even great empires can collapse, not just slowly, but from a sudden, terrifying blow. Catalonian plains, a last big stand against Attila. You ever wondered what it feels like when everything you know is about to disappear? Imagine the Roman Empire, already tired and weak, facing its biggest fear, Attila the Hun. He was called the Scourge of God. His armies swept across Europe like a destructive storm. It truly felt like nothing could stop him. But even against this terrifying enemy, there was one last, desperate effort. This was the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. Here's what happened. Rome knew it couldn't fight Attila alone. So, for this crucial battle, Romans joined forces with old enemies, the Goths, and other tribes like the Franks. It was incredible. Different peoples, usually fighting, now stood side by side against one massive threat. They fought not for new conquests, but simply to survive. They fought for their homes, their families, for a world not entirely ruled by Attila's armies. This wasn't Rome at its strongest. This was a wounded empire, holding on to its last breath. A grand story nearly finished. Think about being on a team in a huge championship game. You're behind. The other side seems unbeatable. Time is running out. Everyone is tired, maybe scared, but your leader tells you, one more push. Together, all small differences disappear. You unite, giving everything, knowing this is your final chance. That intense feeling of a unified, last stand. That's exactly what happened on the Catalonian plains. The fighting was brutal, a clash of courage. Attila's invasion was stopped, but the victory was heavy. It bought a little more time for the empire. Yet, here's the thing. It couldn't stop the end forever. It shows us that even when things are falling apart, people can find immense bravery, standing united for what they believe in, one last, meaningful time. It reminds us of the power of a shared stand, even against overwhelming odds. Rome sacked again, this time by the Vandals. Have you ever felt like you just barely made it through a really tough time, only to have something even worse happen right after? Imagine that feeling, but for an entire city, an empire that once seemed eternal. Just a few decades after the Visigoths had plundered Rome, another powerful group showed up at its gates. These were the Vandals, a group whose name still makes us think of deliberate destruction. But their raid in 455 CE wasn't random smashing. It was a planned, devastating blow to a city already on its knees. By this point, Rome was a fading memory of its glorious past. The city's walls were weak, its leaders often fought among themselves, and its people carried a deep weariness. When the Vandals, led by their clever king Gazaric, sailed across the Mediterranean from North Africa, Rome barely had the strength to resist. Think of a very old, grand house that's been through many storms. It still stands, but the roof leaks, the paint peels, and the foundations feel shaky. Then, another, even bigger storm hits, threatening to tear it apart for good. That's a bit like what Rome was facing. The Vandals weren't just looking for a quick smash. They spent 2 whole weeks systematically taking everything of value. They gathered gold, silver, priceless statues, and magnificent artworks. They loaded their ships with treasures that had been collected over centuries. It was like watching someone carefully, methodically, empty out every precious item from a family's attic, not in a rage, but with cold, calculating intent. This wasn't a sudden burst of violence. It was a slow, painful draining of Rome's very soul. This second attack, so soon after the first, hit Rome differently. It wasn't just another defeat. It was a sad, undeniable confirmation that the mighty Roman Empire was truly unraveling. It showed the world, and the Romans themselves, that their empire was no longer invincible, perhaps not even able to save itself. And that's why this moment matters. It reminds us that even the greatest, most enduring powers can stumble and fall. It's a quiet, serious moment to think about how much can change, and how quickly, when the strongest foundations start to crack. Sometimes, the end isn't a sudden explosion, but a gradual fading, a series of painful goodbyes. Romulus Augustulus, the last boy emperor of the West. Have you ever thought about how some very important things end? Not with a huge explosion, but with a quiet whisper. That's what happened to the Western Roman Empire. For over 1,000 years, Rome's name meant power and majesty. But in 476 AD, it all came to a gentle, almost unnoticed stop, with a boy named Romulus Augustulus. Here's the thing, his name itself echoed greatness. Romulus, like the legendary founder of Rome, Augustulus, a small version of Augustus, the first emperor. But this Romulus was just a child, probably around 15 years old. He wasn't a powerful leader. His own father, a general, put him on the throne and held the real power. Then, just a few months later, another general, Odoacer, simply removed him. Think of it like this. Imagine your school's oldest, most famous club. It's been around for decades, but over time, fewer people join. The club still exists, technically, but doesn't do much. Then, one day, the last student involved quietly graduates, and no one bothers to start it up again. It just ends. There's no big announcement, no dramatic closing ceremony. It just fades away. That's a bit how it was for Romulus Augustus. He was the last official Western Roman emperor, but he didn't truly rule. He just held the title for a short while, a placeholder for power already gone. After him, no one else took the Western crown. It wasn't a violent overthrow for him. Odoacer sent him away, giving him a pension. A boy emperor, quietly removed, without even a fight. So, here's what happened. The great empire didn't crumble in a single, loud crash. It slowly lost its strength, bit by bit, until a young boy took its last breath. And that's why it matters. It reminds us that even the grandest stories can have a gentle, almost sad, final chapter. A quiet ending for something that once shook the world. Odoacer takes the crown. A barbarian king in Rome. Have you ever seen something that seemed like it would last forever, only to watch it change quietly? That's a bit like what happened to the Western Roman Empire. For centuries, Rome was the center of the world, a symbol of power. But by 476 AD, things were very different. Rome was weak. Its emperors were often puppets, controlled by powerful military generals. Many generals weren't Roman. They were from groups Rome called barbarians, like the Goths, already part of the army. The empire felt hollow inside. Then came Odoacer. He was a general, but not Roman. In 476 AD, he marched into Italy. The young Roman emperor was Romulus Augustulus, just a boy in a stand-in. Odoacer didn't burn Rome or start a huge war. What he did was quieter, yet so important. He just made the young emperor step down. Instead of naming a new emperor, Odoacer sent the crown and purple robes, all the imperial symbols, to Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. This was his way of saying, no more emperors in the West. Odoacer then ruled Italy himself, not as an emperor, but as a king. Think about your favorite old oak tree in the park. It's been there forever, a landmark. But over many years, its roots get weak, branches fall, and it gets hollowed out by bugs. One day, a storm doesn't knock it over. It just crumbles. Then, a new plant grows where the old tree was. The park exists, but the old landmark is gone, replaced. This wasn't a sudden, fiery end for Rome. It was more like a sigh. The 1,200-year story of the Western Roman Empire didn't end with a huge battle. It just ended, quietly. New leadership simply stepped into the empty space, and that's why it matters. Sometimes big changes in history don't happen with a roar, but a whisper. It makes you wonder how something so great could fade away. The Western Empire falls. A grand story ends. Have you ever wondered if even the biggest, strongest things can just end? The Roman Empire felt like it would last forever. For hundreds of years, it was the most powerful force, shaping everything around it. But like all long stories, even Rome's had a final chapter. And for the Western Roman Empire, it wasn't a sudden crash, but a slow, quiet fade. Here's the thing, Rome didn't just disappear overnight. It was more like a giant, ancient tree, slowly getting weaker over many years. Its strong parts started to give way, branches breaking off. There were so many reasons. Outside, tribes called barbarians pushed hard. Inside, leaders fought. Money became a problem, and people felt less connected to the idea of Rome itself. The empire grew too huge to spread out, like a rubber band stretched too far until it finally broke. Imagine a really old game you loved to play. It was incredible at first. You spent hours, but over time, new updates stopped coming. Bugs appeared. Newer, flashier games came out. Slowly, fewer and fewer people played, until one day, the game's servers were just turned off. The game's story ended, even if you still remember it. That's a bit like what happened to the Western Roman Empire. The year 476 AD is often marked as the end, when the last Western Roman emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, was removed. For most people then, it wasn't a big, dramatic moment. It was just a quiet realization. The empire had slowly faded, but it left behind so much: its laws, its roads, its language, and countless ideas that still shape our world today. It reminds us that even big things built by people eventually change, but their ideas can live on. And that's pretty amazing, don't you think? The East lives on. Byzantium keeps Roman ideas alive. When we talk about the fall of Rome, it sounds like everything just stopped, right? Like a story suddenly ended, leaving only silence. But here's the thing. History is rarely that simple. What if I told you that a huge piece of Rome actually kept going, thriving for another 1,000 years? In the East, the Roman Empire continued. We call it the Byzantine Empire today. But to them, they were simply Romans. They carried the torch, even when the West had fallen into chaos. Imagine someone you admire greatly passes on, but their most important lessons, their favorite songs, their wisdom, they live on powerfully in your own actions and memories. That's a bit like what happened. The Byzantines saved so much. They kept ancient Roman laws alive, collecting them and making them clearer in what became known as Justinian's Code. This code still influences laws today, showing how deep its roots grew. They preserved stunning art, intricate architecture, and countless books filled with the knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome. These were not just copies, they were active, living traditions, honored and evolved. Think about your favorite song. Even if the band that wrote it breaks up, that song doesn't just disappear from the world. Other artists might play it, or new musicians might be deeply inspired by its sound, creating something fresh but carrying the spirit of the original, the essence, the feeling, the impact. It lives on, finding new voices and new ears. So, even when the Western Roman Empire changed forever, the spark of Roman culture didn't die out. It moved, it adapted, it found a new home in Byzantium. This part of the empire reminds us that ideas, laws, and art are often stronger than armies or borders. They can endure, reshape, and continue to shine, carrying the past forward into an entirely new future. It's a powerful thought that the most important parts of us can find ways to live on. Justinian's dream, trying to reclaim the lost West. Have you ever dreamed of bringing something important back to how it once was? Imagine something you loved, something really big and powerful, just ... broken. That's how it felt for many when the Western Roman Empire fell. Its heart, the city of Rome, was no longer in control, but in the east. In a city called Constantinople, an emperor named Justinian couldn't let go. He dreamed of more than just ruling the east. He dreamed of putting the whole Roman Empire back together. Like a giant, shattered mirror he felt he had to repair. This wasn't just about power. It was a deep, aching desire to reclaim something lost, something sacred. He truly believed he could restore Rome to its former glory. Think about trying hard to fix something broken beyond repair. Maybe a favorite toy or a friendship that ended. You wanted so badly for it to be like it was before. Justinian poured immense wealth and countless lives into his dream. His armies fought across North Africa, Italy, and Spain. They won many battles. He did manage to take back some of those lands. But here's the thing. The world had changed. The pieces didn't quite fit anymore. The old ways were gone. The unity that once held Rome together was a memory, not a living thing. Sometimes, even with the strongest will and the biggest dream, some things, once broken, can only be remembered. They can't truly be rebuilt. And that's a hard lesson, even for an emperor. Hagia Sophia's beauty, a church that touches the sky. Have you ever stood somewhere so amazing? It felt like the building itself was alive, like it was reaching up, trying to touch the heavens. Imagine a place where light pours in, making everything glow, and the space feels so huge, it almost takes your breath away. That's a bit like what it must have felt like to walk into the Hagia Sophia for the first time, back when the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, was at its peak. This wasn't just any church. It was built in Constantinople, a city at the heart of the Roman world, in the 6th century. Emperor Justinian wanted it to be the grandest building ever, a symbol of God's power and his own. And here's the thing, they pulled it off. When you look up at its massive dome, it doesn't seem to sit on walls at all. It feels like it's floating, suspended by invisible chains from the sky itself. The architects used clever tricks with light and space, making the huge structure feel weightless, almost divine. Think about it like this. Have you ever seen a picture of Earth from space? It looks like a perfect, beautiful marble, hanging there, effortlessly. You know it's massive, but it appears so calm and light. Hagia Sophia creates a similar feeling inside. It makes you feel small, but also connected to something much bigger, something ancient and deeply spiritual. People would walk in, and their worries might just fade away, replaced by wonder. It was a place designed to make you feel close to God, to experience a glimpse of heaven on earth. For centuries, this building stood as a powerful reminder of Rome's enduring legacy, even after the West had fallen. It showed the world that the emperors in the East still dreamed big, still created wonders that inspired awe. It's a place that whispers stories of faith, power, and human ingenuity, reminding us how beauty can lift our spirits and make us feel truly, deeply part of something magnificent. Justinian's Code, laws that shape the future. Have you ever thought about why we have rules, not just in your classroom, but in your town, or even your entire country? Imagine a time when a powerful empire was so old, so vast, that its thousands of rules had become a tangled, confusing mess. That's what Rome faced, centuries after its greatest days. Imagine trying to find one specific fact in a million unorganized books. Then came Emperor Justinian. He believed that for a society to be fair, for people to trust justice, laws needed to be clear and consistent. So, he began a massive project, collecting every Roman law from over 1,000 years. His team didn't just gather them, they went through each one. They threw out laws that didn't make sense or were unfair. They organized the good ones, making them clear and easy to follow. Think of building a complex model. If its instructions were scattered across hundreds of tiny, conflicting slips of paper, you'd be lost. Justinian's code was like taking all those confusing pieces, correcting errors, and turning them into one clear, step-by-step manual. This wasn't about new rules. It was about making existing, messy rules work better, more fairly, and more logically for everyone. This collection, Justinian's Code, didn't just bring order to a fading empire. It became a quiet, powerful foundation for how many places in the world would think about law. Ideas we still hold dear today, like your property rights, or the belief that someone is innocent until proven guilty, found lasting strength in Justinian's careful work. It's a quiet testament to the human need for order and justice. It reminds us that ancient efforts to define right and wrong can echo through time, shaping the ground rules of our modern world. It's a powerful whisper from the past, showing us how deeply connected we are to history, and how the search for fairness never truly ends. The Justinian plague. Sickness decimates the empire. Have you ever thought about how something unseen could bring down a powerful empire? We often think of wars or bad leaders, but sometimes the greatest enemy is invisible. Around 541 CE, the Roman Empire, already divided, faced a terrifying foe, the Justinian plague. This wasn't just a bad flu. It was a super deadly disease, much like the later Black Death, tearing through cities and towns. This bacteria, carried by fleas on rats, moved swiftly along busy Mediterranean trade routes. Imagine waking up to news, neighbors, friends, even family, suddenly sick and dying within days. Fear gripped everyone. No one knew how it spread or how to stop it. The plague struck millions, rich or poor. Cities grew quiet, fields lay empty, armies couldn't fight, government struggled, trade stopped. Life itself felt slowly drained from the empire. It's a bit like a terrible flu sweeping through your school. Classrooms half empty, everything feels off. Now, imagine that on a massive scale, with no medicine. Imagine the crushing silence, how hope might vanish. That's what happened. This massive death toll made people question everything. This unseen enemy didn't conquer Rome with swords, but with sickness. It profoundly weakened the empire, making other problems easier. It reminds us how fragile even great civilizations can be, and how something tiny can utterly change everything. The rise of Islam, a new world power emerges. Have you ever wondered what happens when an old world starts to crumble, and something entirely new rises from its dust? Imagine the lands around the fading Roman Empire, tired from centuries of war, with people often feeling lost. It was into this world, far to the south in the Arabian Peninsula, that a powerful new story began. This story was Islam. It started in the 7th century with a man named Muhammad, who received messages from God, or Allah. These messages taught about one God, and asked people to live with justice, kindness, and community. Here's the thing. In a place where tribes often fought each other, this message offered a feeling of belonging, a shared purpose. It was like suddenly finding a common language among many groups, uniting them under one belief. Think of it like this. Imagine you and your friends are trying to solve a really tough puzzle, but everyone has a different idea of how the pieces fit. It's messy and frustrating. Then, one person steps forward with a clear, simple method that suddenly makes sense to everyone. That method changes how you work together, and soon, the puzzle comes together incredibly fast. That's a bit like what happened. This new faith spread with astonishing speed. It wasn't just a religion. It quickly built a new way of life, a government, and an entire civilization. The Byzantine Empire, old Rome's eastern part, was strong but exhausted. Persia, another ancient power, was also worn down. So here's what happened. This vibrant new Islamic empire, full of energy and shared purpose, grew quickly, spreading its influence across vast territories that once belonged to or bordered Rome. They brought new ideas in science, art, and learning, creating centers of knowledge that would shape the future. It shows us how deeply human beliefs can reshape maps, cultures, and even the course of history, leaving behind a legacy that continues to influence our world today. Losing key lands, the empire shrinks, bit by bit. Have you ever seen something really big slowly get smaller, like a giant balloon gently letting out its air? That's a bit like what happened to the Roman Empire. For hundreds of years, Rome was a huge power, its lands stretching far and wide. But then, things changed. Slowly, parts of this enormous empire began to break off. Imagine you have a really big house you worked hard to build and keep safe. But over time, you can't afford to look after all the rooms. So, you stop using one, then another. Each lost piece wasn't just dirt. It meant losing important resources, like food and metal. It meant losing people who paid taxes and joined the army. The empire felt weaker, less sure of itself. Its huge borders, once a sign of strength, became harder to protect. Here's the thing, this wasn't one huge enemy attack. Instead, think of a magnificent sandcastle on the beach. You spent forever building its impressive towers and walls, but then, the ocean tide begins to creep in. Gentle, persistent little waves wash away a tiny bit of your wall, a small corner of a tower. You try to fix it, but slowly, bit by bit, the castle gets smaller, less grand, until it's just a sad, flat mound melting into the sand. There's a deep sadness in watching something so powerful slowly fade away. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a quiet, almost gentle, shrinking. This reminds us that even the mightiest things aren't truly permanent. They can erode, little by little, leaving behind memories and lessons about change. Even the biggest can eventually shrink, losing their grip, one piece at a time. Losing key lands, the empire shrinks, bit by bit. Have you ever seen something really big slowly get smaller, like a giant balloon gently letting out its air? That's a bit like what happened to the Roman Empire. For hundreds of years, Rome was a huge power, its lands stretching far and wide. But then, things changed. Slowly, parts of this enormous empire began to break off. Imagine you have a really big house you worked hard to build and keep safe. But over time, you can't afford to look after all the rooms. So, you stop using one, then another. Each lost piece wasn't just dirt. It meant losing important resources, like food and metal. It meant losing people who paid taxes and joined the army. The empire felt weaker, less sure of itself. Its huge borders, once a sign of strength, became harder to protect. Here's the thing, this wasn't one huge enemy attack. Instead, think of a magnificent sandcastle on the beach. You spent forever building its impressive towers and walls, but then, the ocean tide begins to creep in. Gentle, persistent little waves wash away a tiny bit of your wall, a small corner of a tower. You try to fix it, but slowly, bit by bit, the castle gets smaller, less grand, until it's just a sad, flat mound melting into the sand. There's a deep sadness in watching something so powerful slowly fade away. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a quiet, almost gentle, shrinking. This reminds us that even the mightiest things aren't truly permanent. They can erode, little by little, leaving behind memories and lessons about change. Even the biggest can eventually shrink, losing their grip, one piece at a time. Iconoclasm, fighting over holy pictures. Have you ever looked at a picture of someone you love deeply, like a grandparent or a pet? That picture isn't the actual person, right? But it holds so much meaning for you, a feeling of connection. Now, imagine if people started arguing fiercely, even fighting, over pictures like that. But these images were meant to represent God or holy figures. That's what happened in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, known as Byzantium. This intense, emotional struggle was called iconoclasm, which literally means image breaking. For a long time, Christians used icons, painted images of Jesus, Mary, or saints to help them pray and feel closer to their faith. They saw these images as a way to connect with the divine, not as the divine itself. But some powerful leaders grew worried. They watched people kneeling before icons, kissing them, and began to think, are we worshipping the picture instead of God? They feared it was becoming idolatry, breaking ancient rules. So, they ordered that all icons be destroyed, smashed, or painted over. But for countless others, taking away their beloved icons felt like tearing away a piece of their soul. It caused deep sorrow and a bitter split. Think about a sports team's flag. It's just cloth, but for fans, it stands for their loyalty, their history, their shared passion. No one worships the flag, but they respect what it represents. If someone said, "That flag is just fabric, you shouldn't care about it," it would feel like an attack on your identity. That's how strong the feelings ran during iconoclasm. It reminds us how deeply symbols matter. We use them to express our biggest hopes and deepest beliefs. But this story also shows how easily those same symbols can become a source of terrible conflict, turning people into enemies. Sometimes, the way we show our faith can overshadow the actual faith itself, leading to pain instead of peace. It's a sad reminder of how fragile understanding can be, even when everyone believes they are doing what is right. Charlemagne crowned emperor, a new hope in the West. Could a single moment, a crown placed on a head, truly light up a continent that had been in shadows for centuries? Imagine the world after the Western Roman Empire crumbled. It was like a grand house, once full of light, left empty and falling apart. For hundreds of years, laws felt weaker, learning was harder to find, and people often lived in fear. There was a deep sadness, a quiet longing for the order and greatness that was lost. Then, on Christmas Day, in the year 800, something amazing happened in Rome. A powerful king named Charlemagne, who had united much of Western Europe, knelt in St. Peter's Basilica. As he prayed, Pope Leo III placed a gold crown on his head, declaring him Emperor of the Romans. This wasn't just a political move, it was a deeply emotional moment. It felt like a promise, a whisper across the land that maybe, just maybe, the old days of peace and greatness could return. Think about it like this. Imagine your favorite sports team has had a really tough losing streak. Year after year, the fans are sad, the players feel defeated. Then, a new, inspiring captain steps forward. They don't just play well, they lift everyone's spirits, bring back the teamwork, and suddenly, there's a buzz. People start believing again. That's a bit how it felt for many when Charlemagne was crowned. He offered a vision of a new beginning, a time when learning would flourish and justice would be upheld, protecting people like the old emperors. But here's the thing, hope can be a fragile thing. Was it truly a rebirth of Rome, or something entirely new, built on different foundations? What this moment showed us is our human need for connection, for leadership, for the idea that even after the longest night, the sun can rise again, bringing with it the possibility of a better day. It reminds us that even when great empires fall, the dream of order and a brighter future never quite dies. The Great Schism. When East and West churches split, have you ever wondered what happens when two parts of something very old and very important slowly drift apart, not because of one big fight, but many small differences that build up over time? That's a bit like what happened to the Christian Church, which was once united under the vast Roman Empire. For centuries, the Christian faith grew from Rome, but then a new power rose in the East, Constantinople. Over time, these two centers, Rome in the West and Constantinople in the East, began to see the world and their faith in slightly different ways. It wasn't about big, angry wars between them. Instead, it was more like a slow, quiet pulling apart, a growing distance in how they understood things and who they believed was truly in charge. The West, led by the Pope in Rome, felt he was the ultimate leader for all Christians. The East, with its own powerful patriarchs, respected the Pope but didn't believe he had absolute authority over everyone. Here's the thing. Imagine you and your best friend have different ideas about how to play a favorite game. You both love the game, you both want to win, but you just can't agree on some of the core rules or who makes the final call. Over years, those small disagreements make it hard to play together. You both still play, just on separate teams, maybe even on separate fields. That's a little like how the Western Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church became two distinct branches. They shared the same roots, the same core story, but their paths diverged. This split, called the Great Schism in 1054, was a profound moment. It reminds us that even with shared beliefs and a common beginning, human differences, questions of leadership, and cultural ways can create divides that last for centuries. It's a quiet sadness, seeing something whole become two separate parts, each carrying a piece of the original dream. It shows us how deeply history can shape what we believe and how we live, even today. The Crusades begin. Byzantium asks for help. Have you ever felt so overwhelmed, so unable to fix a problem alone? Like you needed someone, anyone, to help. Imagine the once grand Roman Empire. Its western half crumbled long ago, but the eastern part, the Byzantine Empire, still stood, its capital Constantinople gleaming. For centuries, it carried Rome's ancient legacy. By the 11th century, Byzantium faced immense pressure. New groups, like the Seljuk Turks, pushed closer, taking land, threatening everything. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos saw his borders weakening. He knew he had to act. He sent a desperate plea to the West, to the Pope in Rome. He asked for military aid, not conquest. He just wanted soldiers to push back invaders, to protect Christian lands. Think of a school group project. Your team is good, but one section feels too big. You're trying hard, but falling behind. So, you ask another team, or your teacher, for a little help. Just temporary support to get through it. You're not asking them to take over, just to lend a hand. That's a bit like what Byzantium did. But here's the thing. Sometimes, when you ask for help, you get more than you expected. Or the help changes everything, in ways you never saw coming. This desperate call from Byzantium was a spark. It lit a fire across Europe, starting the Crusades. People in the West answered. They came not just as soldiers, but with their own beliefs and goals. It reminds us that a simple request for aid can echo through history, creating huge, unforeseen consequences. It shows how one moment of need can set off a chain reaction, changing the world deeply and lastingly. Constantinople sacked 1204. A betrayal by Christians. What happens when the people you believe are on your side, sharing your deepest beliefs, suddenly turn against you? So here's what happened in 1204, an event that wounded the Roman world deeply. Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, was a Christian city. It was a place of incredible wealth and culture, seen as a beacon of their faith and the direct heir to ancient Rome's glory. But this wasn't an attack from a foreign army. No, this was more heartbreaking. Crusaders, Christian knights from Western Europe, were meant to be on their way to fight in the Holy Land. They were supposed to be united by faith. Instead, money, power, and political plots pulled them off their sacred path. And that's why it matters. These supposedly holy warriors, wearing crosses, turned their swords on Constantinople. They didn't protect the city. They stormed it, not to save it, but to conquer and loot it. Imagine your school's sports team, all wearing the same colors, all meant to work together against another school. But then, right before the big game, half your team attacks the other half, stealing their equipment and trashing your own locker room. It would be shocking, right? A complete betrayal of trust. That's a little like what happened here, but on a citywide scale, with lives, sacred places, and trust at stake. Churches were desecrated, priceless art was stolen or destroyed, and countless innocent people suffered. The city, meant to be a sister in faith, was brutally violated by its own supposed allies. This act of Christian violence wasn't just a battle. It was a deep wound on the soul of the Christian world, a fracture that would not truly heal. It showed how easily human greed and political ambition can twist even noble intentions. This event wasn't just the fall of a city, it was the shattering of an idea, a sobering reminder that sometimes the most profound betrayals come from within, from those you least expect. The Ottoman Turks rise, a new empire threatens. Have you ever thought about how some things just naturally give way to others? Like the old leaves falling to make room for new buds in spring. Even the biggest, strongest things in the world eventually face their end, or at least a big change. For the last bits of the Roman Empire, this change came in the shape of a powerful new force, the Ottoman Turks. Imagine the Eastern Roman Empire, also called the Byzantine Empire, like a very old, beautiful oak tree. It had stood for so long, weathering countless storms, but centuries had passed, and its branches were thinning, its roots not as strong. Then, from the lands to the east, a new forest started to grow, vibrant and full of energy. This was the rise of the Ottoman Turks. They weren't just another group, they were a new empire forming, driven by a different culture, different beliefs, and a fierce, determined spirit. Here's the thing, history isn't just about one empire falling and another simply taking its place. It's about a massive shift in how the world works. Think of it like this. You might have an old, classic video game console that you absolutely loved. It was cutting edge for its time, and you spent hours on it. But then, a brand new generation of consoles comes out, with incredible graphics and totally new ways to play. The old console isn't bad, but the world has moved on. The new one is powerful, exciting, and unstoppable. That's a bit like the Ottomans to the Byzantines. They brought new ideas, new ways of fighting, and a hunger for expansion. Their rise wasn't just a political shift, it was a profound human story, marking the true end of an ancient era. It reminds us that nothing lasts forever in its original form. Every great thing, no matter how strong, eventually faces its moment of transition. And in that transition, new stories, new dreams, and new empires are born from the ashes of the old. It's a powerful, almost sad, but also incredibly honest truth about the flow of time and the human journey. Constantinople falls 1453, the final end of Rome. Have you ever wondered if something truly ends, like completely vanishes, leaving no trace? For the idea of Rome, that question echoed for centuries. We learn about the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, but here's the thing, a strong part of Rome lived on. Far to the east, in a grand city called Constantinople. This was the Eastern Roman Empire, also called Byzantium. For nearly 1,000 more years, its people saw themselves as Romans. They kept ancient laws, art, and their heritage alive. It was a resilient ember, glowing softly. Then came the year 1453. Imagine a very old, magnificent oak tree, standing tall for centuries. It might have lost branches, but its roots held firm. Constantinople was like that tree, the last solid anchor of a civilization that once spanned much of the world. The Ottoman army, mighty and determined, surrounded the city. The defenders fought with incredible, desperate courage. They knew they guarded more than just walls. They guarded the final heartbeat of an ancient dream. It was like a tiny candle, flickering bravely in a strong, dark wind for so long, about to go out. The siege was brutal. Hope dwindled. In the end, the strong walls were breached. The city fell. It's like when you finish a truly epic book series you've read for years. You reach the last page, close the cover, and feel a deep, quiet sigh. You know the amazing journey is truly over. That's what happened in 1453. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just a battle lost. It was the final, heartbreaking silence for the Roman Empire. Its last official breath. A long, grand story that finally reached its very last period. It reminds us that even the greatest things, built with human effort and belief, eventually reach their closing chapter. But the stories, the ideas, the wisdom they leave behind, those can linger forever. Roman laws echoes, how their rules still shape us. Have you ever stopped to really think about where our ideas of fairness come from? Why do we have rules about everything? From how we play a simple game, to how a whole country runs. Here's the thing. Many of these basic ideas, these invisible pillars of justice that hold our society together, actually started a very long time ago with the ancient Romans. They didn't just build amazing roads and vast empires. They built something even more lasting. A system of law. Imagine a time when rules weren't clear, when fairness was often just a wish. The Romans worked hard to change that. They believed in powerful concepts like innocent until proven guilty. This meant someone had to show real proof that you did something wrong, instead of just assuming it. And they believed that everyone, whether they were rich or poor, powerful or not, should follow the same laws. This was a truly big deal for its time. A powerful idea that said all people had a place under the law, and that their individual rights mattered. It's like the deep, foundational code that makes a computer program work smoothly. You don't always see the intricate lines of code, but they are what make the entire program run fairly and make sense. Without that underlying structure, the program would be a glitchy mess. Roman law is very much like that hidden code for our modern world. Their thinking, their deep need for order, for justice, and for individual rights, still guides how our courts work today. It shapes how governments treat their citizens, and it even influences how we argue about what's fair in our daily lives, like when we decide who gets to go first, or how to share things. When you consider a rule that feels deeply right, or when you feel that something is unfair and needs to be fixed, you're actually connecting to a conversation that started thousands of years ago. It's a quiet echo, a soft whisper of Roman wisdom that tells us, even now, that a fair world is possible and truly worth striving for. It reminds us that good ideas built on justice and equality, never truly die. They just keep living on, subtly shaping new generations, one principle at a time. Latin's lasting voice, words that still surround us. Have you ever wondered if the voices of the past can still echo in our world? Not just in history books, but right here, right now. It's amazing, but even though the mighty Roman Empire eventually fell, its language, Latin, never truly died. Instead, it whispered into our words, weaving itself into the very fabric of how we speak and think today. For centuries, Latin was the superpower of languages. Emperors spoke it, poets wrote it, and it created laws that shaped civilizations. When people wanted to share big ideas in science or understand the universe, they often used Latin. It became the language of knowledge, a bridge connecting thinkers across vast distances and different times. And that's why it matters so much to us now. Think about it this way. When you look at a video, you're actually hearing a Latin root. Video, meaning to see. And when you listen to audio that comes from audio, meaning to hear, so many words we use every day, without even thinking, have a piece of Rome inside them. Words like status, manual, circus, and memory. They all carry that ancient Roman sound. It's like finding old coins in your pocket from a forgotten time. These words are like tiny time capsules, holding the echoes of Roman life, their triumphs, and their challenges. And this isn't just about old words, it's about how ideas travel through time. It shows us that even when empires crumble, the ideas and feelings, the very ways people express themselves, can live on. They transform, they adapt, but they don't vanish. So, every time we speak, we're not just sharing our thoughts. We're carrying forward a quiet, powerful legacy from a civilization that shaped so much of who we are. It's a gentle reminder that we are all part of a much longer story, connected by these enduring whispers from the past. Roman engineering, bridges and roads, still stand tall. Have you ever paused to think about how some things, truly, just refuse to disappear? Like, genuinely lasts for thousands of years, still standing strong today. It's kind of amazing, really, when you let that sink in. The Romans, they figured out how to build things so incredibly well that their bridges still arch gracefully over rivers, and their ancient roads, worn but resolute, still crisscrossed landscapes across Europe. It's almost like they knew we'd still be looking at them, thousands of years later, wondering how they did it. They used some incredibly smart ideas. A big secret was their concrete. It wasn't exactly like ours, but their version was a mix of volcanic ash, lime, and water. This stuff was unbelievably strong, especially when it cured underwater. And then there were the arches. Imagine pushing two sides of a wall together, and the middle actually gets stronger, holding everything up. That's what an arch does. It takes all the weight and spreads it out evenly, so a bridge or building can hold enormous loads without collapsing. This wasn't just clever, it was like a quiet magic for construction. Think about when you're building a really tall tower with blocks. If the bottom layers aren't totally solid and flat, if you stack them wobbly, the whole thing will eventually crash down, right? But if you take your time, make each layer perfect, and connect them firmly, that tower stands strong. That's exactly what the Romans did with their roads. They weren't just throwing rocks down, they built them in layers, a deep foundation, then smaller stones, gravel, and finally, a paved surface. This meant water drained away, and the road wouldn't sink or crumble easily. These roads weren't just paths. They were like the veins connecting their massive empire, letting soldiers march quickly, carrying goods for trade, and bringing people together. It showed how organized they were, how powerful they wanted to be, but also their deep desire for connection. When you stand on a Roman bridge today, you're not just touching old stone, you're touching a piece of their dreams, their hard work, and their quiet belief that what they built would last forever. And for many things, it truly has. It makes you think about what we build today, and what echoes of our time will remain for future generations. The idea of empire, a powerful dream that lived on. Have you ever thought about how some ideas just never seem to die, even when the thing they belong to is long gone? That's what happened with the Roman Empire. It eventually fell apart, but the idea of it, this powerful dream, lived on for centuries. Here's the thing, Rome wasn't just a place, it was a giant, complicated dream of what a perfect, ordered world could look like. Imagine a world where people from many different places lived under one strong government, with shared laws and a promise of peace. That was the dream of Rome. It was a hope for a society so big and so well organized that it would last forever. It truly captured people's imaginations. After Rome itself faded, many people across Europe and beyond still looked back at it. They saw the ruins, read the old stories, and felt a longing for that lost greatness. Kings and emperors, centuries later, still tried to build their own kingdoms to be like Rome. They wanted that same power, that same kind of lasting order and respect. They wanted their own version of the peace Rome had brought, even if it was just a memory. Think of it like this: a truly amazing song, even after the band breaks up, still inspires new artists. People listen to it and think, I want to create something that powerful. Or maybe an incredible sports team from the past, even decades later. New players learn about their achievements and dream of reaching that same level of greatness. The spirit of that team, that idea of excellence, keeps going. And that's why Rome matters so much. The idea of its empire, this big, grand vision of unity and order, stayed alive in people's hearts and minds. It shows us how something you can't even touch, something only in our thoughts, can shape the world for thousands of years. It's a quiet reminder that powerful ideas, even more than stone buildings or armies, can truly endure. Rome's art and architecture, beauty that still inspires. Have you ever stood before something truly old, built centuries ago, and felt a quiet wonder, like a bridge still standing strong, or a sculpture so lifelike it almost breathes? That's the feeling many get when they encounter the art and architecture of ancient Rome. These weren't just buildings or beautiful objects. They were grand statements, solid testaments to a powerful civilization, speaking volumes without a single word. The Romans built their world to reflect their values: strength, order, the enduring power of their empire. They wanted their cities to not just function, but to inspire awe and remind everyone of Rome's greatness. So, their architects and artists crafted structures and artworks that were both incredibly practical and profoundly beautiful. Think of the enormous aqueducts, those magnificent stone channels that carried fresh water over vast distances, literally bringing life to their cities. Or consider the grand public baths, places where citizens didn't just clean themselves, but gathered, debated, and exercised amid stunning mosaics, intricate carvings, and towering statues. Every detail served a purpose, adding to a shared experience of beauty and civic pride. Here's the thing about Roman construction: it was built to defy time itself. Imagine you're making an important school project, something you want to last and impress. You'd choose the best materials, plan every step carefully, and make sure it looks amazing, right? The Romans approached their buildings with that same dedication, but on an epic scale, with durable concrete and massive stones. Look at the Colosseum, its mighty arches still standing, a silent echo of crowds. Or the Pantheon, a temple with a perfect, unsupported dome, a true marvel that feels modern in its design. These structures aren't just ruins, they are persistent whispers from the past, showing how deeply humans desired to create something lasting. And that's why their legacy still touches us today. When we see these ancient creations, we're not just looking at old stones or faded frescoes. We're feeling the ambition, the ingenuity, the deep human desire to leave a mark, to build something that outlives us all. Their art and architecture remind us that even across thousands of years, the pursuit of beauty and the drive to build a better, stronger world are universal human desires. It's a quiet, powerful message about the enduring spirit of creation. The Republic's legacy, ideas about how to govern. Have you ever thought about why some people get to make all the rules, and others just follow? For a long time in ancient Rome, kings held all the power. They decided everything, and no one could tell them no. But then, something important happened. The Romans decided they were tired of just one person being in charge. They wanted a system where the public think, as they called it, or res publica, was managed by many people, for the good of everyone. This began the Roman Republic. Here's the thing: they didn't just kick out the kings and let chaos take over. No, they set up a smart system. Citizens would elect representatives, people to speak for them. These leaders would make laws, but they also had to answer to the people who elected them. It was all about checks and balances, so no one person or group got too powerful. Imagine if, in a team sport, only the coach could make all decisions without listening to the players. That wouldn't feel right, would it? The Republic was like a team where every player, through their elected captains and strategists, had a voice in how the game was played, even if they weren't the star player. This idea, that power should be shared, and that law should apply to everyone, not just the people, but even the rulers, was brave and new then, and that's why it matters. Even today, thousands of years later, when we talk about democracy or electing our own leaders, we are quietly echoing the Romans. We are remembering that deep human desire to have a say in our own lives, to believe that our voices can build something stronger, something more fair. It's a powerful thought, That long ago, people bravely decided to trust each other, to share the burden and the triumph of governing, and in doing so, they left us a whisper of hope for how we might still build a better world together. The Christian Church, how Rome shaped our faith. Have you ever stopped to think about how something small and personal grows into a massive, organized force? When Christianity began, it was just a few followers of Jesus, sharing stories and beliefs. But here's the thing. This new faith emerged and grew inside the vast, powerful Roman Empire. And Rome, in surprising ways, deeply shaped what the Christian Church would become. Imagine a tiny seed trying to grow in a huge, ancient garden. Rome was that garden, with its laws, its roads, its system for getting things done. For centuries, the Roman Empire saw Christians as a threat. They tried to crush this new religion, asking people to give up their faith or face terrible consequences. But the more Rome tried to stop it, the more Christianity spread, often in secret, from city to city, across the Roman world. Then, everything changed. An emperor named Constantine made Christianity legal. Later, it became the official religion of the empire. Suddenly, this once outlawed faith had millions of followers, stretching from one end of Rome's domain to the other. How do you manage that? The church, needing to keep everyone connected and believing the same things, started to look at Rome for ideas. They borrowed Rome's ideas for laws, its way of organizing regions with leaders, and even how to hold big meetings to decide important beliefs. They even used Roman building styles for their churches. Think of it like a giant school club that started with just a few friends. As it got bigger, with members in every grade, the club needed a president, a treasurer, clear rules, and a way to communicate across the whole school. The Roman Empire, with its long history of order and administration, gave the Christian Church a blueprint, a kind of instruction manual for becoming that organized, global institution. It's a strange thought, isn't it? The very empire that once tried to destroy Christianity ended up giving it the structure and framework to become one of the most powerful and enduring forces in human history. It shows how even our greatest challenges can sometimes leave us stronger, shaping us in ways we never expected. Lessons from Rome's fall. What we can learn today. Have you ever stopped to think about why we still talk about Rome, thousands of years later? It's more than just old stories and crumbling stones. The fall of Rome isn't just a sad ending. It's like a warning, an echo from the past that still has something deeply important to tell us about ourselves and our own world. What did Rome struggle with in its final chapters? A big lesson is about division. People stopped feeling like one united country. There were huge differences between the wealthy and the poor, causing deep resentment. Leaders often forgot who they served, prioritizing their own power or money over citizens' well-being. They faced tough choices about resources, like cutting down forests, changing their land, and sometimes they let small problems fester, ignoring complaints or unfair systems. These tiny cracks became wide chasms, hard to cross. Rome teaches us that even the strongest things weaken if their foundations crack, little by little. From the inside out. Think about a strong, tall tree. It looks mighty, but what if its roots get weak, or tiny insects slowly eat at its trunk from inside? If no one notices, or everyone thinks it's someone else's problem, then one day, even a normal windstorm could bring that whole once great tree crashing down. It wasn't just the wind, it was all those tiny, ignored issues adding up, making it vulnerable. So, when we look at Rome, we're not just studying old history, we're seeing ourselves reflected. We must consider what truly holds our communities together. What values do we protect? How do we listen to each other? Rome's quiet story reminds us every generation has choices. We can learn from the past, mend today's cracks, and build something stronger, together. Or, we can let small problems grow too big. It's a heavy thought, yet a hopeful one. It means we have power in our hands, right now, to shape our future, simply by caring and acting. Why Rome still matters. Its spirit never truly died. Have you ever wondered if something truly disappears, even when it's gone? Like a great story that ends, but you keep thinking about it long after the last page. Rome, that giant empire, fell a long time ago. Its emperors are dust, its mighty legions just memories in books. But here's the thing. Rome never fully vanished. Its spirit, its very essence, the core of what it was, found a way to live on, quietly shaping our world even today. Think about it. We still use important ideas from Roman law, concepts of justice, fairness, and how to govern people. Many started with them. When you see a grand government building with tall, strong columns, you're often seeing an echo of Roman architecture. Or consider a well-built road, straight and strong. That's a Roman idea. It's like a tiny seed planted centuries ago that still influences the massive trees growing now. It wasn't just about bricks. It was a way of thinking about society and how to build things to truly last. Imagine your grandma's special recipe for cookies. She might be gone, but you still bake cookies that use her special touch, her method, her spirit. You've changed it a bit, made it your own, but that core idea is still there. That's how Rome's influence works with us. Its DNA is in our laws, our engineering, even how we think about what a strong country should be. We might not even realize it, but Roman ideas are deeply woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. So, while the Roman Empire might have ended, the incredible lessons it taught us, the good, and even the complicated ones, keep speaking to us across time. It reminds us that what truly lasts isn't just power or grand buildings, but the ideas and values we choose to build our world upon. And that, in a profound way, makes the spirit of Rome truly immortal. The endless story of Rome, a civilization that keeps giving. Have you ever wondered if anything truly ends, or if it just transforms, finding new ways to exist? Rome, a civilization we've explored through its towering triumphs and its slow, fading light, offers us a powerful, hopeful answer. Its physical empire eventually crumbled, yes, but the spirit of Rome, its incredible ideas and brilliant innovations, never truly left us. Instead, they flowed like an invisible river, deep beneath the surface of time, quietly seeping into the lands and cultures that came after. They shaped the very foundations of the world we live in today, often without us even realizing their subtle presence. Think about how much of our daily lives carries an echo of Roman genius. Many of our laws, the foundational principles of how our governments are set up, and even the basic structures for the roads we drive on, all carry a trace of Roman thought. The names of our months, powerful words like veto or senate, and so much of our common language itself, they all have deep, enduring Roman roots. It's like when a truly great song is written, even decades later, new artists might remix it and make it their own. But the original melody, the core idea, still shines through, passed on and kept alive. This idea of a civilization giving even long after its own time has passed is a truly profound one. It whispers to us that what we create, what we believe in, how we build our societies, these things don't just vanish into thin air when times change. They possess a lasting power, a kind of quiet energy that lives on through countless generations. It reminds us that every moment, every invention, every thoughtful decision we make today could become a silent, precious part of someone else's future, a meaningful gift reaching across the ages. Rome's story isn't just ancient history, it's a living, breathing part of who we are, quietly showing us that true human influence, born from great effort, can be eternal. Rome in our world, how ancient history touches our lives. Have you ever looked at a school building, or maybe even thought about how our laws work, and wondered where these ideas truly began? It's easy to think of ancient Rome as just dusty old stories, far away. But Rome isn't just history, it lives and breathes in our world today, shaping so much of what we experience, often without us even knowing it. Think about justice, or how our governments have different parts. Many of these big ideas for society were first tried out by the Romans. They gave us so much, from the straight roads they built, still around, too many words we use that come from Latin, their language. And it's not just about big things, it's also about how we think. Imagine planning a school project. You need steps, rules, a clear plan, that organized way of thinking, breaking down problems to find lasting solutions. That's a Roman echo. They were great at organizing, building systems that worked, from laws to engineering. That desire for order, for structure, it still guides us. So, when you think about being innocent until proven guilty, a rule so important for fairness, you're touching an idea that stretched back 2,000 years. Or when you see a beautiful dome, like on a government building, you're seeing Roman genius reflected. It's like a quiet voice from the past, reminding us we are all part of a grand, ongoing human story. This connection reminds us that the struggles and wins of people long ago are not so different from our own. They faced tough times, built big empires, watched them fall, and left behind lessons for our modern lives. Their story is, in a way, our story, still happening. Knowing that makes history feel less like a distant past, more like a living part of who we are today.